All right, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started. Thank you for your patience during our briefings. All right, just a reminder to our sponsors, you are not timed, although please sponsor responsibly, but all your panelists and everybody else who testifies will be on the timer, and we will start with HB 69. Delegate Ampry, welcome. You are our first bill hearing of the 2024 legislative session, so start us off right.
Thank you so much. I heard there's a rule like the first one has to be passed, so I'm hoping that's still in effect here. When I was in the committee, no. Mr. Chair, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be before you today. And members of the committee, again, for the record, Delegate Marla Ampry in here, support of House Bill 69, Live Near Where You Teach program. This bill is being introduced to administer a home buyer assistance program that assists teachers and staff members to receive certain low interest mortgages for the purchase of homes near where their member is employed. It also will provide certain other incentives to encourage educators to live near the schools where they will be working within. The reason I bring this bill forward is I served as a teacher for 4 years before I went to law school. And as a teacher, I lived in the exact same zip code as my students. But living in the same zip code as the families and members that you serve, you not only get to learn your community better, it allows you to be a better teacher. You have more buy-in and the community members entrust you, and you're really able to deliver better content. As a result, in my 4 years of teaching, I was able to ensure that my students were successful. My last 2 years of teaching, I taught at the Seed School of Maryland in the 40th District, actually lived on campus. And when I tell you my students who came from across the state, from areas where it was really difficult for them to attain a certain academic achievements, we were able to break records at my school and we're able to really do some amazing things. I think a lot of that had to do with my ability to be near and around my students. I also think we're at a time where we want to make sure that our teachers are being supported at the highest level. This is the third time I brought this bill here. I would just want to say that I know there are the thing that we've heard in the past, there are other programs that are similar. And I want to make sure I distinguish my bill from other programs. What separates my bill from other programs is other programs that have Live Near Where You Work programs, the area in which you can live is much larger. So you might be able to work for a school district and you can live anywhere within the district. My goal is for this legislation is that teachers will live in much closer proximity to the actual schools that they teach at. We know that if you live in Prince George's County, or if you live in Baltimore City, you can live 30 to 40 minutes away from where you could actually teach and still be able to capture some of the programs that currently exist. But the goal of this program, as I would want it to be instituted, would be that it would be a much closer proximity, living in the exact same zip code or living within, a certain mileage difference where you actually are connected to the community in which you serve. With that said, also, I would want to bring your attention to the fiscal note. Last year's fiscal note, that is, there was not one. This year there is one. So we're trying to better understand how that occurred, but we're also willing to work with language to make sure that we can figure out how we can cut down on some of the costs here. I think there are some members of the school communities that we can maybe manipulate how we can make that work. Also, some of the rental assistance language that's in the bill, we're also willing to work towards reducing significantly so we can make this bill work. But ultimately, I'm asking for a favorable report and open to have some dialogue so we can better understand how we can hopefully move this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Ampry. First question is Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Delegate Ampry, for bringing this bill. I just wanted to ask about Baltimore County's testimony. They said that they support with amendments. They would love to see an amendment that would make this available for transportation, grounds, and facility management people as well. I guess if you're trying to keep the fiscal note down, that's probably not something you're considering at this time.
That's the current struggle we have, is if we open it up to as many people as possible, it reduces the amount of funds we have. And ultimately, the true goal and intent behind the bill comes from the data that I've seen. My personal experience is that the educators' proximity to the students and the families that they work with, and making sure that that's attained, and making sure that, again, like even down to the curriculum you teach, if you understand the culture and the community that you are serving, the curriculum is going to be better, and I guarantee you'll have better education achievement. So I think that some of the questions around who do we include, It might have to be a little more limited given our current financial constraints. But I'm hoping that if the program is successful with the smaller number of people over time, once we figure out how we can move some money around at the state level, we can hopefully open it up to more individuals. But I wish we could, but I don't see how it could fiscally work this year.
Understand. Thank you.
Delegate Silver, do you have a question? Okay. I do not see any other questions, Delegate Amprey. Let's call up Lisa May from the Realtors for favorable testimony.
Stay here. I'll stay.
However, you can just stay there,
I'll
Delegate
stay.
Amprey.
More the merrier.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, Lisa May with the Maryland Realtors, here in support of this bill. As we hear from Marylanders who wish to become homeowners and who wish to stay here in the state, we hear two things over and over again. One is I have a full-time job, but I don't make enough money to afford to become a homeowner or to stay in my rental property. And two, I have college and student loan debt that is preventing me from reaching my housing goals. And I think we can all agree that those two conditions apply to teachers more than anyone because one, they are more highly educated than those in the state. And yet their wages lag those of similar educational attainment. In order to help them overcome those conditions, we believe in supporting programs such as the one that is contained in House Bill 69. We ask for your support.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Thank you both very much. Colleagues, I'll just note that we have a lot of written testimony in the system, both favorable and informational. Delegate Amprey, thanks for joining us. Colleagues will now move to our own Delegate Stewart, HB 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the greatest committee in the history of the Maryland House of Delegates. It is yours truly, Delegate Vaughn Stewart, and this is House Bill 3. I want to also thank the chair for the new sponsor testimony policy. I will say I will only be violating and abusing it maybe 6 or 7 times this session, and I really hope all of you will do the same. House Bill 3 is
Sorry, let's move on to HB 260.
See, we have time to banter like this, Mr. Chairman, without my time running down. HB 3 is a very simple step and a very small step, but a meaningful one in addressing the affordable housing crisis in Maryland that we're going to be hearing a lot about this session and that we've heard a lot about in past sessions in this committee. The bill simply requires counties and municipalities to expedite, to fast track affordable housing developments in certain circumstances. We have a definition for what constitutes affordable housing in the bill, and the circumstances that I'm referring to are basically when nonprofits are building affordable housing on land that they own. The other group that essentially would get this fast track status are public housing associations. So if you're a public housing authority or a nonprofit and you're building housing on land that you own, the county would have to expedite the development process for your project. We do not define what fast tracking projects means in the bill. We instead leave it up to the counties to decide the form that they want to take in fast tracking the projects. We do include a non-exhaustive list in the bill of various different ideas that we would have or that other counties have adopted in the past to fast track these types of projects, but ultimately it's up to the counties to decide. We also, in a very, I think, kind attempt to make sure that counties didn't feel put upon by this bill, we also added a waiver provision to the bill where counties, if they don't feel that they can logistically comply with the bill's requirements because it would be too onerous or too expensive or otherwise, can apply to the Department of Housing and Community Development and request a hardship waiver that would get them out of the bill's requirements. You will see in your bill file that we have put together quite a hodgepodge, a mosaic of supporters for this bill. Everyone from preservationists to realtors, everyone from MACO with amendments to architects, and everyone from affordable housing advocates to Bob Benton himself. The fiscal note also, you'll see notes that for most counties reported they're already doing that. So they're either already doing this in some form or fashion, or they could meet the bill's requirement under existing resources. So, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, in conclusion, this is a small but meaningful step towards the ultimate goal of making it faster and simpler and cheaper to build affordable housing in Maryland in a way that does not frustrate county autonomy or county expenses, and in a way that builds, I think, a broad cross-section of support across the state. And I urge a favorable report.
My name is Reverend Dr. Elizabeth Sapp Jones. I bring you greetings from ETEP Consulting and the First Baptist Church of Guilford in Columbia, Maryland. I am here today representing people acting together in Howard, Action in Montgomery, and Anne Arundel Connecting Together. Who are we? More than 65 communities of faith and schools representing tens of thousands of registered voters across 3 counties. Why should you listen? Because we have won over $1.5 billion for affordable houses in places like downtown Columbia and in the many districts across our jurisdiction. Maryland is in a housing crisis. There is a shortage of over 96,000 homes, and the price of renting or owning homes is out of reach for many. I am here because my mother-in-law has been forced to come and live with us because of her fixed retirement income of just Social Security. She can't afford a place of her own. I am here because my son, who just graduated magna cum laude from North Carolina State University, can't afford to live in a place in the county in which he lives. Our church, like many others across this state, has land that could be used to help them to remain independent and live affordably. I am here because faith communities and schools representing tens of thousands of registered voters across 3 counties are asking for your support of House Bill 3 so that congregations who want to use their property to build affordable housing can do so to help seniors and young adults like mine live their lives independently and with dignity. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegates, are there others on your panel?
I think so. I mean, anyone else? Yeah. I mean, Dan, you can, yeah. Yeah. They were a little shy. Yeah. Dan's
Okay.
on the panel. Claudia can come up. Yeah, we're all getting kind of in the swing of things, Mr. Chair. We have this
I know the feeling.
first day, second bill.
I know that. Go ahead, Dan. Oh, sure.
Can you hear me? All right, good afternoon. My name is Dan Reed and I serve as the Regional Policy Director for Greater Washington. We're a nonprofit that works to advance sustainable housing and transportation policies in Maryland. And we support House Bill 3, which will expedite the approval process for affordable housing developments. As has been said, we have a significant housing shortage, and that's led to double-digit increases in rents and home prices. You know, the permitting process in many jurisdictions can be a huge barrier to producing much needed housing. You know, and applicants can spend years, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to secure an approval. That's even worse if you are from a faith community or a nonprofit that may have limited experience or, you know, the means for something like that. And ultimately, Maryland's working families pay the price in lost housing options and diminished access to economic opportunities, social networks, and daily needs. This bill would help address that by requiring local jurisdictions to create a streamlined review process for affordable housing projects developed by nonprofits or housing authorities. We believe it's one of the many tools that we need to increase our housing supply, and most importantly, to ensure that people have the chance to build lives, families, and careers in Maryland. So we hope you'll give us a favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Claudia Wilson Randall. I am the Executive Director of the Community Development Network of Maryland. We are a statewide network of housing and community development partners across the state. And I am here today to speak in favor of House Bill 3. As my colleagues have already spoken about, we have a critical shortage of affordable housing in Maryland, and we need every tool that we can deploy that the state has at its disposal, to build as fast and as efficiently as we can. I think this is an excellent step forward to use property owned by nonprofits and by housing authorities in the state of Maryland. I would also like to say that we need housing for people. And if you don't think that this is a problem of yours, I would just think about, as you go through the day, the person who serves you coffee, the person who takes care of your elderly mother, maybe your elderly mother, maybe a child, maybe a person with disabilities. They are all facing critical, dire circumstances because of lack of housing. I would also like to say that this critical shortage is also tied to many things that this committee will deliberate on. Housing is health, housing is economic development, housing is climate and sustainability, and housing is education. So the blueprint, while important, will not be sustainable if students are moving around. Those schools will never be able to be successful if that many students are facing housing instability. I ask your favorable report for House Bill 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We do have some questions for the sponsor in this panel. I'll just caution, not every panelist needs to answer every question. Delegate Healy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question, Delegate Stewart, is related to the park and planning testimony that really calls for it to be broadened out and allow anybody who's building affordable housing to benefit from the expedited system. So is that something you're open to?
Yeah, in short, yes. And I really appreciate the question. You'll see in your packet essentially two types of amendments. You'll see one flavor of amendment that you're talking about, which is folks that want the bill to be broadened. That's something that I'm always generally going to be in favor of. You know, my bill's being broadened. It's the committee's obviously jurisdiction and product now. And it'll be the committee's decision about whether that takes place. I personally would be happy to see that. I also know the governor and his housing package has a relatively similar proposal that I'm sure that we'll be debating as well. I'm open to it. The other flavor though that you'll see is that MACO, which I don't know if Don Butchko is here today or not, but they'll come up and there he is here. I can confirm. NACO will come up with, I think, a couple of sensible amendments on their end as well. And so I'm open to all the amendments. Ultimately, it'll be up to the subcommittee process to determine it. But I think the idea of expanding it does have some merit.
Thank you.
Delegate Terrassa.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Delegate Stewart, for doing this bill. I really support and applaud the goal that you're trying to achieve here. And I just wanted to make sure, well, I have two questions. One is that I want to make sure, because you define very broadly what could be done to expedite the process. And I just want to make sure that that couldn't allow them to skip environmental or other sort of safety protections like electrical inspections or all those other things. And I just want to make sure that that's taken care of in there, because obviously people who need affordable housing, I'm sure you'll agree that people who need affordable housing deserve the same safety and environmental protections.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I do not want fast tracking development to mean that people have to live in less safe housing. And of course, as you know, I've had a number of bills over the years to make sure that people can not only live in affordable homes, but also safe and healthy homes as well. So yes, I definitely do not want that to happen. I don't want any safety reviews to be skipped. I don't think that this bill would allow that, but if it does, I'm absolutely open to additional language to ensure that we sort of plug any holes there.
Okay, I really appreciate that. And one more question, if I may. Does the nonprofit, and I think I may have asked you this offline, so I apologize if we've already done this, but does the nonprofit have to continue to own the property? Or how would that work?
So under the bill, they would have to own the property in order to get the expedited review. They wouldn't have to own it in perpetuity to get it. They wouldn't have to pledge that they're going to forever own it in order to get the expedited review. They would just have to own it at that point in time when they apply for the permits. Now, what I will say to Delegate Healy's point is that there are some amendments that I'm sure that the subcommittee will take up that want to expand that to be, well, if a nonprofit is involved, maybe they don't actually have to literally own the land when they go through the permit process. Because I know that one issue that's come up in the process of me putting the bill together is something like a vacant, where a nonprofit or maybe even a public housing authority would want to purchase a vacant property from like an out of state or out of country owner to fix it up. Well, they don't actually own it when they're applying for the permit, maybe to buy the property or to buy it and then additionally get some sort of conditional use authority. So I think that there are some tweaks, some minor kind of technical tweaks we can do with that. But yeah, they wouldn't have to promise that they're going to own it in 3024.
So it could lead to home ownership rather than just rental. So, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Stewart.
We're back at it.
So obviously affordable housing is very important and we need to do everything we can to build it. The bill defines the developments impacted here as those where at least 50% of the dwelling units are reserved as affordable. Are you concerned at all about creating concentrations of poverty by building, concentrated developments of affordable housing as opposed to inclusionary type communities where affordable housing is a part of a larger community and, where concentrations of affordable housing can create other problems, including disinvestment, where sometimes businesses are reluctant to locate in areas where there's a large amount of affordable housing?
Yes, I am very concerned about the problem of concentration of poverty where you have very, very high levels of affordable housing that's required. I'm also really concerned about setting levels of affordability that are so high that no projects will realistically ever pencil out. And by shooting for really high levels of affordability, what we've actually done is create no housing at all. Very concerned with both of those problems. In fact, in probably about 30 minutes, you are going to hear me extol the virtues of mixed income housing and deconcentrating poverty in discussion of a different bill. So I am happy to work with you and other members of the committee to make sure we get those percentages right. I know that there are some amendments that have already been proposed to, I think, play around with both the percentage of AMI and the percentage of units that are affordable. And I'm confident in the committee that we'll come to the right number.
Thank you.
Do not see any further questions, Delegate Stewart, for your panel. We do have another panel of favorable in-person witnesses. Robert Enton, Lisa May. Any of you are here, just please come on up. Lisa May, Will Green, and Lori Graff. And whoever sits down first, please just go ahead and get started.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Robert Enton on behalf of the Maryland Building Industry Association. And we're in strong support of Delegate Stewart's bill. And I'd urge you to please take a look carefully at the language in the bill. What the bill does is it mandates that the counties have a plan to deal with this. It doesn't in any way, shape, or form dictate what must be in the plan. It lists a number of items that says that a county may, and then it lists 6 different things that they could do to move this along. In addition, at the end of the bill, it says that a county may request a waiver from the Department of Housing and Community Development if the local jurisdiction has a good faith belief that it cannot meet the requirements. So I don't think this places any heavy burden on anyone, but it sends a message to the counties, you need to address this issue in some fashion. That's what it does. And I'll also point out that what the bill says is that when we're talking about affordable housing development, we're talking about individuals whose household income is less than or equal to 80% of the area median income. 80%, not 50%, not 40%, but 80% of the median income. Now, I don't know what the incomes are in your individual counties, but you're talking about basically trying to help out and have development for people with median incomes or lower. So I think this is a good bill. I think you ought to pass it. Can't see what possible harm this bill will do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Lisa May with the Maryland Realtors. And it would be a really rare opportunity for me to say something better than Bob Benton had. So I will just add a very hearty ditto to everything he and the other panelists have said here today and ask for your support.
Great. Other than complimenting Mr. N, that was great testimony. Last call for Will Green or Lori Graff. Will Green or Lori Graff.
She's
Okay.
not here today, Mr. Chairman. She couldn't be here.
Thank you. Okay, we will turn to
You do have our written testimony as well.
Great, thank you. We will turn to the virtual favorable testimony. We have, I'm sorry, Delegate Terrassa. Sorry, Bob, there's a question. Mr. Renton, there's a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Delegate Terrassa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I wouldn't know what to do if I didn't get a question.
I know, Mr. Enton, I didn't want you to be disappointed. Two things that came up from your testimony. One is the same question I asked the sponsor. Do you think that it's phrased in a way that a county could eliminate certain safety or environmental requirements in order to speed up the process, environmental reviews or safety reviews?
I apologize, but I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Okay, is that any better?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, so the question I asked the sponsor, and that I'll ask you, is do you think it's phrased in a way that would allow a county to waive or otherwise exempt a project from certain environmental reviews or safety reviews, such as electrical?
Once again, I think when you look at the bill, all the bill says is you got to have a plan. That's all.
Okay, so it would allow for that the way it
Yeah,
is.
you have
So
to
we
have
might
a
need to tighten it
plan.
up.
But at least it's a step in the right direction to require the counties to take a look at this and
Okay.
come up with their plan may be next to nothing. It doesn't say how much money they have to spend. It doesn't say how many developments it has to apply to. It
Okay.
could be next to nothing, but it says, you got to look at this. That's what the bill says.
Oh, and I think that's great. That's what I love about the bill, but I'm just making sure that we have adequate protections for people we're building housing for. So if you think that it would allow for that, then perhaps I'll work with a sponsor to tighten that piece up.
Well, I'm happy to work on it. We think the bill ought to pass, and if there are amendments that need to be considered to make it okay with everybody, fine. I'm happy to work on them.
Okay, and then the other piece of that is that you said something about, and I apologize because I didn't look close enough to see this, but it's 80% AMI. Is that what the bill
So
aims at?
what the bill says is would apply to people whose family incomes, household incomes are between 50 and 80% of the median income for the state of Maryland.
So, okay, so in Howard County, that would mean somebody making $90,000 or more might qualify.
I think,
for the affordable
once again,
housing.
it's county by county.
Okay,
So, the median income for Howard County is obviously a lot different than what it is for Somerset. So,
well, it's.
but it's
area
county by
median income.
county, and I, not to repeat myself too much, but it doesn't mandate anything except that they adopt a plan. That's all.
Great, thank you.
Okay, now I do not see any more questions. So thank you, Mr. Enton. We will turn to the favorable virtual testimony. We have Shanice Bamiro from Prosperity Now, Yvonne Brooks Little from AIM, and Chris Parts from AIA Maryland. So I think they will pop up on our screens, hopefully. Mr. Parts, why don't you go ahead since you're the first one up on the screen?
Certainly. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Corman and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. I'm Chris Parts, an architect with AIA Maryland and representing nearly 2,000 architects across the state of Maryland. I've practiced for over 30 years and have had the opportunity to work with many nonprofits to repurpose existing buildings, which is not all that this bill is about, but part of the bill, a large part of the bill. In many cases, the conversions I've worked on have been built to affordable housing. Repurposing takes a building once designed and built for a specific purpose and gives it a new life. My experiences have enabled me to work on former schools, convents, healthcare properties, manufacturing structures, and others. This process often requires a change in building use that sometimes requires zoning exceptions and almost always requires building updates to comply with regulations. The zoning and code compliance aspects of repurposing a building and structure take time and effort. This proposed legislation may help to expedite the process of compliance and enable entities to more readily progress with opportunities for affordable housing. Charitable entities trying to develop affordable housing are often cobbling together grants and financing sources to make the project cost balance. Expediting the process, as suggested in this bill, may simply help to align the approval process with financing requirements. AI Maryland supports this bill as it is, but in speaking with Delegate Stewart, we've suggested some possible friendly amendments. One being expand the meaning of affordable housing to include residential development for persons with disabilities who have abilities to pay rent well below the median income. And additionally, not many charitable organizations have the capital to acquire land speculatively to enable them to own and then later develop a property. So we suggested some alternate pathways for scenarios we've experienced in helping some projects come to life. These suggestions offer options other than ownership of a property to allow an expedited process. And these include a property being vacant for 5 or more years with financing in place and a contingent offer on the property, as well as surplus property of a jurisdiction with financing in place and a contingent offer on the property.
Thank you so much. That was 2 minutes. Do we have Shanice Bomiro from Prosperity Now?
Yes, I'm here. I'm trying to turn on my video, but I think the host has to re-allow me to share my video. Okay, thank you. All right.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 3. My name is Shani Spamiro. I'm a proud Marylander and the state and local policy manager at Prosperity Now. Prosperity Now is a national nonprofit organization where we work to build an economy that is fair, just, and free from structural racism. House Bill 3 will help expedite the approval process for charitable organizations or public housing authorities to build affordable housing units while still maintaining the rigorous standards of review. We see this bill as a pathway to facilitate the increase of affordable housing units in Maryland. Like some of my colleagues have said, Maryland is experiencing a housing shortage, and it is estimated that Maryland is short anywhere from 96,000 housing units to 120,000 housing units. And if we look at housing cost burden, where a person's housing costs are more than 30% of their income, a parallel picture arises. According to the National Low Income Housing Coalition, approximately 41% of low-income Maryland residents, or those between 80 to 51% of the area median income, are cost burdened. As you look at households with low or extremely low income, the number of Marylanders who are cost burdened grows to at least 80%. So not only are there not enough housing units, but also low income households are struggling to pay housing costs in their current living situations. The Maryland Housing Needs Assessment and 10-year strategic plan has plainly prescribed an increase of affordable housing units in order to meet the needs of low-income households. House Bill 3 facilitates that goal by providing a smoother process and customization for counties to meet their affordable housing needs. So thank you for your time, and I urge you to vote favorably on House Bill 3. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have Yvonne Brooks Little on the virtual as well? Please go ahead. I think you're on mute. There you go.
Good afternoon. My name is Yvonne Brooks Little. I am on the Board of Directors for Action in Montgomery, also known as AIM. I am also a member of Harvest Intercontinental Church in Olney. AIM's membership includes 35 congregations and schools representing tens of thousands of residents across geographical, racial, and socioeconomic backgrounds. In our most recent listening campaign, we talked to over 1,500 people face to face, and the number one issue we heard was the need for affordable housing. My professional career was spent in radiation oncology as a radiation therapist, dosimetrist, administrator, and educator for 30 plus years. When I was planning to retire, I realized that I needed to downsize. It was extremely difficult to find a place to live that matched my retirement income. After nearly a year, I realized the only option I had was to stay in Montgomery County to live in subsidized housing. After much searching, I was able to move into Victory Senior Housing. It's been awesome to live in a modern community with amenities that I am accustomed to, with new friends and engaged in activities with other Silver residents near Rockville Town Center and the Metro. There are many people in my congregation and in our communities who need affordable housing. Seniors like me, school teachers, professionals, people who are disabled, and families, all these people are important to our community. To address the current affordable housing crisis, we need multiple approaches, including more development of affordable housing. One of the biggest challenges for building affordable housing is finding land. Many congregations, like my own, are interested in building affordable housing on our property. The process is incredibly cumbersome and expensive. House Bill 3 will go a long way to make it possible to build affordable housing on congregational property. Congregations like mine see building affordable housing as part of their mission to support the community. I will skip to and say we strongly urge you to support HB 3 so that we can move housing in our communities to meet the need. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for our virtual favorable witnesses? I do not see any, so we will move on. Thank you all for testifying. We'll move on to our in-person favorable amendment witnesses. We have Dominic Butchko from the Maryland Association of Counties, Miranda Willems with the Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition, and I believe that is it for in-person favorable with amendments. So Dominic, right when you sit down, please go ahead and begin.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dom Butchko with the Maryland Association of Counties here testifying favorable with amendments on House Bill 3. First, I want to thank the delegate for putting in such a good bill. I know I normally start all my testimony with that, but I actually mean it here. I also say that too. No, housing is an important issue. MACO has made it a legislative priority this year, so you will be seeing me a lot supporting good bills like this. That being said, my members do request two very minor clarifying amendments. The first one, the bill talks about 80% AMI. 80% AMI is really close to market rate and isn't targeting the area of affordability that we really need. So we just request that that be shrunk down to 60% AMI to really hit those people who really need it. Additionally, while we do appreciate the waiver provision, there are some concerns, and I think I saw the secretary for DHCD here, so my apologies, but I think there are some concerns that DHCD might not be able to accurately assess whether a local jurisdiction should receive a waiver or not. You know, our 24 jurisdictions, the way they do planning, it is very unique. Different jurisdictions have different processes. We say that a lot, but it's really true, especially when it comes to land use and development. So if we can come up with a more holistic way to issue those waivers, that would really alleviate a lot of our heartburn on this. That being said, otherwise, this is a very targeted bill that balances local autonomy, but addresses a really big issue this session. So accordingly, MACO urges a favorable report with amendments. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Miranda Darden-Willems, and I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition, here in favor of House Bill 3. MAKE is an association representing both for-profit and nonprofit affordable housing developers and their partners who work across Maryland to build, own, finance, and manage income-restricted affordable rental housing. As you've already heard, we're in a housing crisis. According to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, we need an additional 146,000, to give you a different number than you've heard already, affordable rental housing units to meet our needs. This is a very big number. It will take time, collaboration, and a significant financial investment from both the public and private sectors to accomplish. So we very much appreciate the bill sponsor coming up with creative ways to support our work. So thank you, Delegate Stewart. It can easily take a year for a county to review a site development application and issue permits. So we appreciate the intent of the bill to speed up that review process for affordable housing projects. We do have a technical amendment that's outlined in my written testimony, but I will summarize it this way. We ask you to focus on the end user, the low-income tenant who will reside in the unit, and not the type of developer that's proposing the project when deciding which projects get to skip the line, so to speak. Both nonprofit and for-profit developers are building the exact same projects with the exact same financing and restrictions. So rather than limit the expedited review process to only nonprofits, we would ask that it be available to any developer as long as the tenants that they're serving are low income and as long as there are restrictive covenants governing that affordability for the long term. We thank you for your consideration and urge a favorable report.
Thank you both. We have a question from Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mr. Butchko. Thank you for your testimony, both of you, for being here and for your support of this bill. It's a very important bill. My question is, I am a little concerned about talking, and maybe you could enlighten me a little bit. I mean, I don't know how you would have an approach to grant waivers if you didn't do it through DHCD, because we would need some overarching authority. Otherwise, everybody will opt out. So I just wondered if you had some ideas about what that holistic approach would look like.
Yeah, so I think that is a great question, Delegate. Thank you very much. So, and I'm not saying that DHCD shouldn't be the one to grant these waivers. I'm just saying that there has to be a way that we come up with better determination for if they should or shouldn't be done. So whether that's a metric system or a formula, or another way, maybe coordinating with the Department of Planning. But I mean, each jurisdiction, their technical capacity really is vastly different. Like Garrett County and Prince George's, apples and oranges. So if we can just come up with a system that kind of weighs those the way they should be, that would be great.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Great. I do not see any other questions for this panel, so thank you both again. We have one virtual favorable with amendment witness, Jordan Bachholm Colbert from the Maryland National Capital Region Park and Planning Commission. Hopefully she'll pop up on our screen in a second here. There we go. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you kindly, Chair. Thank you, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce. Again, my name is Jordan Bachholm Colbert. I'm the Government Affairs Liaison in the Office of General Counsel for the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. Our commission board has voted to support this bill with friendly amendments, and we also have written testimony for the record. This bill in its current form seeks to establish and implement expedited development review process for certain proposed affordable housing developments. And the commission has been working in communication with the sponsors to support these goals. At the time, housing in crisis is critical. The commission values efforts to bring more affordable housing to the market as quickly as possible and fully supports this initiative. One thing you will read in our testimony is reference to amendment to expand the scope. We recommend that the sponsor amend the bill to make any developer eligible whose project meets affordable housing development definition, my apologies. This bill would strike the language as written in the bill with any project that meets definition of affordable housing development per that section. As this bill is working to remove barriers to housing development, it is important to ensure that any developer, no matter their corporate structure, is supported in providing these critically needed affordable units. Additionally, we ask that the sponsor provide clarification on ownership status. Alternatively, if the applicability of expedited process remains open only to charitable organizations and public housing authorities, we recommend that language, as indicated in the bill, be amended to say that owned or controlled by the organization or related subsidy. Again, many charitable organizations and public housing authorities may have their subsidies that are owned through land, or they may have the property under contract, but don't have the formal ownership. This amendment would ensure those types of projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for this witness? I do not see any. Colleagues, that concludes the hearing on HB 3. We will now turn to HB 225. This was introduced by me on behalf of the department. So let's bring up the Secretary of Planning. And I don't know if we also have a representative from the Department of Housing and Community Development, as well as Mr. Boyd from the Department of Planning. Great.
Good
Lineup. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you. Hi, good afternoon, Chair Corman and Vice Chair Boyce and everyone from the committee. Happy to be here today with you all. I'd also like to thank you for being here and thank Secretary Day for being here. We've been sort of a partners in this, what we have bringing together. And then when you get to the really tough questions, I have Chuck Boyd, our Assistant Secretary of Planning, who's been in the trenches with Smart Growth in Maryland for quite so many years. For the record, I am Rebecca Flores, Secretary of Planning for the Secretary for the Maryland Department of Planning, currently serving as the interim chair of the Smart Growth Subcabinet. For those of you who don't know me too well, I look forward to meeting you and many more of you I've met, but look forward to more. But just for a quick background, I have 40 years of professional planning experience in rural, suburban, and urban areas, and also as a developer in the nonprofit, public, and private sectors. So I've been on all sides of the equation as it relates to development and growth in a variety of areas. Our objectives today, basically, with the amendment you have in front of you, is to first build on the success. There's been tremendous success in what Maryland has done in smart growth and really been a national leader. We also want to leverage this subcabinet that we have that is really cross-agency to look at issues, difficult issues like housing and others, and how we can bring those together. We want to update the current legislation to include the pressing issues of resiliency and equity that were not part of the original legislation when it was passed many years ago. And we want to basically just also include and really reflect its actual operating structure and the way that it's existed really since 2003. And that it was moved from the governor's office, Governor Glendenning's office, actually over to the Maryland Department of Planning, and has been operating there since 2003. So those are our objectives. I think to just give you some context and background of why we think this is such an important issue today is that we all know we need to grow our economy. That's been repeated several times, I think, at this point by the governor and others. We need to grow, and we need to grow our population. We have a lot of challenges associated with that. We also need to improve our socioeconomic health of all of our communities.
Sorry, Madam Secretary, just to explain for my colleagues, because it's a departmental bill, they're the sponsor. I will ask you to sponsor responsibly, so please use the time wisely. So if you could wrap up, just so we can hear from Secretary Day as well. But generally, the department heads who are here presenting departmentals won't be timed like bill sponsors. So sorry for the confusion and interruption, Madam Secretary.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we do want to kind of set the stage for all of this and then have time for everyone. So we need growth. What we're asking for is that we really kind of think about growth in a different way, and that's called sustainable growth. A lot of people think of sustainability as just an environmental issue, but it actually includes economic growth and social equity issues. And we really want to not only continue to conserve our natural resources, but accommodate the 1 million new people that are expected to be in the state of Maryland by 2050. And ensure that all communities thrive. So I will skip over, you have our written testimony. I'll skip over some additional points that I wanted to make, and hopefully we'll be able to answer questions. The one point I do want to make, though, is of our membership, we have been very actively re-engaged this past year. We've been working on several items. I have a list of those if you're interested. And we put together an action plan for this coming year, collaboratively looking at those important issues that would benefit from all of us working together. So with that, just want to reinforce the fact that we do support this bill. Obviously, we're behind it, and turn it over to my colleague, Secretary Day, to build on that.
Thank you, Secretary Flora. Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for having us here today. I'm proud to be joining Secretary of Planning Flora, who failed to mention in her reference of that long and distinguished career that she was also my teacher at Carnegie Mellon University and taught me everything I know about housing and community development. I'm, of course, here in support of House Bill 225, and I'll start off by saying that the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development has played a critical role in smart growth in Maryland's history. In fact, the Smart Growth Initiative originally had the name Smart Growth and Neighborhood Revitalization, and there's a legacy neighborhood revitalization division, a critical part of our department. Myself and Assistant Secretary for Neighborhood Revitalization, Carol Gilbert, both serve as members of the Smart Growth Subcabinet. As the state's Housing and Place-Based Economic Development Agency, DHCD, has built a strong relationship with the Department of Planning and other members of the subcabinet, as well as the National Center for Smart Growth Research and Education at the University of Maryland. And it's partnerships like that that are critical to the work that we do as Marylanders and for Maryland every day to create, enhance, support, and revitalize sustainable communities. To increase the efficacy and efficiency of the sub-cabinet, we propose making several changes to current membership, including Secretary Flora becoming being designated as chair, myself or the person in my position as vice chair, and the addition of Secretary of Emergency Management. These are valuable and thoughtful alterations that will better position Maryland to face the challenges of climate change and others such as affordable housing shortages that have been discussed here today. The proposed changes to the language also reflect an increased focus on equitable development to counteract historic policies that contribute to ongoing disinvestment. The effects of that disinvestment can look like negative environmental externalities, worse health outcomes, or limited access to healthy foods and green space for hundreds of thousands of Maryland families. Incorporating equity, resiliency, and sustainability into the mission of the sub-cabinet is critical, especially at this moment in time, and it will have real and lasting impact for neighborhoods around this state. Thank you. Happy to both encourage favorable report from the committee and to answer any questions that you have.
Great. Is Mr. Boyd, you're just there for questions? Terrific. Do we have any questions? I do not see any, so thank you. Yep. Sorry, Delegate Stein, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to both secretaries for being here. This certainly seems like a sensible bill. My question is about resiliency. Are you thinking of it in a broad sense, including number of facets, or is it more environmental and climate resilience?
Definitely broad. I think we've been so wrapped up in really the natural disaster side of that equation that we've lost sight of actually the broader impacts, whether they be the pandemic or economic or market sudden shocks to communities, housing. And so this is intended to be very much the broader definition of resiliency.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Stein. I do not see any other questions. Secretary Flora, you have something you want to add?
If I could just add a statement that we do have from former Governor Glenn Denning. I promise it's very short.
Father of smart growth, please go ahead.
We've worked with him in the development, and he's aware of it, and he very much supports it and has provided us a statement. It's very short. If I could please read it into the record. So from former Governor Glenn Denning regarding this bill, he goes on to say, one of the most exciting and impactful accomplishments during my 31 years in elected office was the creation of the Maryland Smart Growth Program. The successful implementation of this program was in large part the result of the important work of the Smart Growth Sub-Cabinet. This crucial group brings together the key stakeholders of Maryland's agencies to collaborate and coordinate the state's efforts in smart growth and affect positive change across our state's communities. Now, over 25 years have passed since its inception, and I am honored to see the evolution of the sub-cabinet and the work it is doing. By ensuring the important themes of equity, resiliency, sustainability are added to the statute, the sub-cabinet is addressing key issues within the principles of the contemporary smart growth mission. This legislation shows the sub-cabinet's commitment to advancing this mission and solidifying the importance of the work of this group and an urgency to address the needs of smart and sustainable growth. I support the changes advanced in this legislation. They will help the sub-cabinet achieve its urgent and important mission. Thank you.
Great. Thank you again. That concludes the bill hearing on HB 225. Colleagues, we are going to jump ahead to HB 11 since we have the majority whip sitting patiently. So if you could come up and bring any panelists that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. I will get started as my panel joins. For the record, Delegate Jazz Lewis, here in support of House Bill 4, which is to establish a workforce development and adult learning leasing training program. The leasing training program, as outlined in this bill, is designed to equip job seekers with the necessary skills to embark on careers as leasing agents within the growing residential rental housing industry. This initiative is particularly crucial at a time when the demand for qualified leasing professionals is on the rise, offering a gateway to stable, well-paid jobs that offer significant growth potential throughout the rental housing industry. The heart of this program lies in fostering designated partnerships that bring together employers, trade associations, local boards, nonprofit organizations, and other relevant entities. These collaborations are instrumental in not only training job seekers, but also in seamlessly connecting them with career opportunities. And by doing so, we ensure that the bridge between training and employment is not just built, but is strong and effective. Moreover, the leasing training program is inclusive in its approach, targeting those who might find it challenging to secure employment. This includes individuals without college degrees, the formerly incarcerated, and those seeking a career change. For many in these groups, options can be limited, and this program offers a lifeline to not just a job, but a career with dignity and potential for advancement. The establishment of this program aligns with our broader vision for Maryland, a state where every individual has the opportunity to thrive and contribute to our growing economy. By investing in our people, we are not just enhancing individual lives, we are strengthening our communities and our state's economic foundation. With this leasing training program, we can support those partnerships and programs that can open doors to rewarding careers for all Marylanders. For these reasons, I urge a favorable report for House Bill 11. Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members. My name is Walter Simmons. I serve as the Executive Director of the Prince George's County Workforce Development Board, along with being the President and CEO of Employ Prince George's. We're the principal workforce development entity in Prince George's County. But through this work, we see a lot of participants and residents who are struggling with housing. While we're seeing they struggle with affordable housing, we're also seeing the housing industry grow. So when we're looking at the data in Prince George's County, and we're getting ready to release a report where we look at youth and young adult unemployment is at an all-time high. In 4 districts across Prince George's County, and while Prince George's County sees a 1.8, 1.9% unemployment rate, 20 to 24-year-olds in 4 of our 9 districts have unemployment rates above 10%. We also see in District 9, youth unemployment for young adults at 22%. This includes people with high school diplomas. So not only are they struggling to secure employment at a time when we have low unemployment, they're struggling with securing affordable housing. In some of these same districts, the housing cost for rent is above $2,000, right? So how are we going to provide an opportunity for affordable housing? Employ Prince George's, the Prince George's County Workforce Board, we don't do anything with housing. What we can do is help our residents increase their wages so that they can have a fighting chance to afford sustainable housing. And this is why we piloted an effort with Maryland Multi-Housing and their Leasing Training Academy to take people with a high school diploma to give them a fighting chance to have a livable wage career, not just a job, and to afford to live in the county that they were raised in. For the last year, we've been partnering and had unanimous success, right? Why? Because we're partnering with the businesses. You hear from the Maryland Department of Labor about we need programs that invite the business, that engage the business. And we built a program that engaged businesses from across the state of Maryland to create a workforce development training program where in 4 weeks, residents with a high school diploma can have a livable wage. And that's what we've done with a great success rate. You'll hear more about it, but we urge that you support House Bill 11 as an opportunity to empower the residents of Prince George's County and across the state of Maryland to have access to a livable wage career to allow them to afford housing.
Hi, my name is Candace Manning. I am currently the Director of Workforce Development and Training for the Maryland Multi-Housing Association. Prior to that, I spent 15 years working in multifamily property management, starting a career in leasing and moving my way up to a multi-site property manager. A career in property management actually has afforded me the opportunity to raise a daughter as a single mother, to purchase a home in Baltimore County, and more importantly, to create all content and facilitate the Leasing Training Academy. About a year ago, the Leasing Training Academy accepted our first cohort in conjunction with Employ Prince George's. Thus far, we have had 48 people go through the program, and through League 3, we have had an 80% employment rate. What makes our program special? As a hiring manager in the multifamily industry, I was able to identify their learning gaps that existed and create a curriculum that was designed to help people transition into professional careers. Simply put, the people you see working in the leasing office don't just work in the leasing office. Property management is a career that can really change your life. So for the first 3 weeks, all LTA students will learn what I call hard skills, everything from phone to fair housing. But the last week, it's 100% focused on soft skills to make sure that people have what they need to be successful as they transition into a professional career. I'm passionate about people. I never thought that property management would change my life the way that it did. It is actually a field that doesn't get enough exposure. People who don't go to college, this is a real way that if they work hard, they can have a good living and see six figures if they put the work in, and the Leasing Training Academy connects people to property management.
Are there any questions for the Vice Chair Boyce?
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for bringing this program. I had a past life in adult education, so I'm always excited about these programs. Can you tell me where the Department of Labor is on this?
Yeah, they're supportive, is my understanding.
I didn't see a letter from them, but that's what I wanted to know most importantly. Thank you so much.
And they supported using American Rescue Plan Act dollars, and with high unemployment, we use Maryland Department of Labor ARPA dollars to support this effort. Of course, we know those dollars are ending.
Any other questions? I do not see any. We have another, thank you, Delegate Lewis and your panel. We have a couple more folks who signed up for in-person favorable testimony. Grayson Wiggins representing MMHA and Juanita Caldwell. I don't know if either of them are here. Come on up.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, Grayson Wiggins, here on behalf of the Maryland Multi-Housing Association. Apologize, I'm doing wind sprints between here and JPR this afternoon. So I think 4 or 5:40 hopefully. But we in full support of this bill. It was important for us to be here. We think, as one of the previous people testified, that as a state, we should be talking about workforce development and housing simultaneously and not in separate buckets. And so with that, Mr. Chair, I would just say us too, and be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I attended the LTA program. I have been a leasing consultant for 128 days. I'm so excited. This program has changed my life tremendously. I was able to leave security and become a leasing consultant to be home with my children and continue to pay rent and live a fulfilling life. I really love the LTA program. It's structured to me to have other abilities. It changed my focus. It changed my it changed my entire life. It got me out of a rut. I only thought at the time that I can only just do security forever. I was a security officer for 14 years. Becoming a leasing consultant, I have now been offered school, college, extra bonuses, and I'm just excited that Miss Candace took me upon under her wing to get me out my rut and put me on a successful path. I'm very grateful.
Thank you. I think I missed LaPrell Williams as well. Is LaPrell Williams here? Why don't you come up and join this panel? I apologize for overlooking your name.
Oh, good afternoon. My name is LaPearl Williams. I'm also known as Pearl or Miss Pearl in my property. Because of Candace Manning, I have a job that I finally love. And not only can I make good money per hour, but I can make profits, which is real money. It's brought a lot more money into my household income that I didn't have over the past 2 years, battling depression, other mental health issues, and struggling to take care of my kids. And I don't have to do that anymore. That program was jam-packed. It was a huge risk, but it was also a huge success for me, because you have to dedicate the time to be there every single day for 4 weeks, like a 9 to 5. And Candace Manning made me want to step everything up: my professionalism, my wardrobe, just how I am as a person. It's reshaped me as a person. It's not just a program for me, it's like a personal thing as well. I can call Candace about anything. She's always very personable with her students. She builds really, really great relationships. I just can't say enough about her. No one is more qualified to teach that program besides her. And it's made a tremendous impact on myself and the lives of others as well. It's a very important program.
Thank you. Thanks to both the participants in particular for being here. Any questions for this panel? Vice Chair Boyce.
I just want to say congratulations on your 128 days.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Grayson, go get some water. We will now we have a virtual favorable witness, Siobhan Dixon, who will hopefully pop up on our screen in a moment. Okay, she's not in the Zoom waiting room, so we will skip Siobhan, and that concludes the bill hearing on HB 11. We'll now turn back to HB 241, Housing Community Development, Just Community Designation, if the department is ready. And thank you for letting us squeeze the majority whip in there, Mr. Secretary.
Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce. It's of course my pleasure to let the whip go ahead of us. Thank you so much for allowing us to join you again today on House Bill 241. For the record, my name is Secretary Jake Day, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development. This is a conversation about the department's bill proposing just community designations. I'm being joined today by Assistant Secretary Kat Gogenauer, the department's new Assistant Secretary for Just Communities. When I was appointed Secretary of the department, I outlined 5 major objectives: pursuing shelter for all, expanding affordable housing, making lovable places, connecting all Marylanders, and finally, righting the wrongs of the past. Just as we heard at the start of today's hearings with coal ash, we often visit injury after injury upon the same poor communities, largely communities of color, over and over again. At this point, government has to do more than rebuild structures and restore services. Because I assure you, just as this is a deliberate exercise to direct resources, every injustice was not the result of some clumsy bureaucracy. Rather, it was a deliberate and motivated effort. Our motivation now is to rebuild trust and to restore hope. We have to get it right this time. As we pursue equity and equal access to opportunity for all, we must also pursue justice for those places who have been the victims of historic and deliberate injustices. One of the ways we plan to do that, and why we're here today, is through the creation of a new just community designation. This will create a new geographic data layer similar to sustainable communities to target state investment. A future just community has past and current economic and housing trends that demonstrate a need for reinvestment in the area. They must demonstrate the community has been impacted by forms of legal racial segregation, such as redlining, urban renewal or highway construction projects, high state imprisonment rates, or unequal exposure to environmental or health hazards. Eligible communities will receive a 5-year just community designation from the governor based upon recommendations from our department. For more information on the just community designation, I'll hand things over to Assistant Secretary Gogenauer, who's going to talk just a little bit more about the implementation procedures. I want to point out that this division, the Division of Just Communities, is new, was created in December of this past year after about 11 months of planning. Assistant Secretary Gogenauer brings with her years of experience as a human rights, racial, and housing policy consultant, and a racial health equity fellow at Prosperity Now.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair and Committee for having me this afternoon. Very excited about the Just Communities designation legislation. The designation will mean that projects in the geographic areas designated as just communities will receive priority consideration for competitive state funding. This just community layer will create a proactive approach to target state investment to help reverse decades of disinvestment and exclusionary policies. The Just Community designation will affirmatively advance equity, civil rights, racial justice, and equal opportunity in the state of Maryland. It will create opportunities for the improvement of communities that have been historically underserved, with anticipated benefits for the entire state, and right the wrongs of the past wherein the state systematically excluded certain groups from equal participation in the benefits of public resources. These efforts are critically important. The team in our newly created Division of Just Communities will work with other offices in DHCD to build and strengthen partnerships in these communities to make sure we are respectful of and responsive to the needs of residents. The creation of the Just Community designation and division marks a new and focused effort by DHCD and the state of Maryland to remedy the injuries of the past to effective minoritized communities. Just Communities will create another mechanism to open those pathways to opportunity in communities that have been previously denied them and ensure that no Marylander is left behind. Thank you so much, and we welcome the opportunity to answer any questions.
Thank you very much to the department. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Secretary. Really appreciate all your work, and this looks like a great bill. I'm really excited about it, and it's really wonderful to have an administration that recognizes the importance of this work. I just am curious, are there any guardrails so that future administrations that may not be as respectful of the need for this type of equity can't pull these areas or remove them?
Delegate Ruth, thank you for the question. We think the most important guardrail is coming to you, the General Assembly here today. It was pretty obvious to us early on that there's some administrative, regulatory, executive actions that could be taken to direct resources. In fact, if you think about some of our programs, they're oversubscribed $6 to 1 in terms of what we have allocated versus what we get requests in the form of requests. And so prioritization is necessary. And certainly we could decide how to prioritize. But rather than that being a decision solely of this administration or certainly of one agency, our sense was that it would be better if the Maryland General Assembly were to adopt into statute this designation so that for years to come, this was a new standard for directing resources to right historical wrongs. There's no way in 5 years, and certainly not in less, that we will achieve all we hope to achieve with this designation. So it's a starting point. Beyond that, I think what we recognize is this will require additional programmatic boundaries and rules to be set up. And so this is a starting point. It's a starting point to, one, bring aboard leadership with expertise. It's also a starting point nationally. There are a few parts of our country that are starting to have this conversation. In Oregon, where Assistant Secretary Goggenauer has experience, in the South, in Boston, there are efforts afoot to address these issues. And we find ourselves sort of on the leading edge. So I think we'll be learning a lot over the years to come.
Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary, I really like this idea. It seems like the main benefit of designating just communities is that that the governor will be able to identify state programs for which they receive priority in application for funding. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And the programs, I know there's some flexibility in terms of identifying which are those state programs, but do you expect that they would be the same regardless of when a community is designated a just community? Like a community is designated just community a year from now, two years from now, et cetera, it would be the same packet of programs?
So Delegate Stein, I don't know that we have envisioned a scenario where we would be so explicit in statute that we would narrow the set of programs. I think we want to keep that flexible to include as many programs as possible. Our focus, admittedly, is on DHCD investment, but I also think a conversation could be had about broader implications for various funding programs that have a direct geographic and anchored concrete impact.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I just have one more question. And Mr. Secretary, is the reason why HS community has to be within a priority funding area?
Yes, so all DHCD funds are restricted to priority funding areas.
Okay.
And so already our programs are restricted to those areas.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Delegate Huey.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a fiscal question. If you're not growing the amount of money available, it means that you're going to be reallocating resources from one place to another. I just try to figure out from how this is going to work. I mean, will you be taking things away from people who already have them in order to give them to these just communities, or is it moving forward as you develop new operations?
Delegate Healy, thank you for that question. I do want to point out that we are asking for additional resources in the budget, and I'll encourage everyone to favorably vote for that as well. Our programs, our state revitalization programs, the investment through rental housing works and other programs that we put into affordable housing, our mortgage programs, the Maryland Mortgage Program, which leverages about $1 billion a year. All of those dollars go into priority funding areas and not they don't come anywhere close to market demand. So today we have set up internal structures for prioritizing where those dollars should go. I don't expect that we will be disinterested in projects today that we would have invested in yesterday. Additional funds may help us go further, but again, this is restricted to capital dollars as well. The focus is on our capital programs, and so this is likely to, yes, concentrate some of those programs, a portion of those programs, in certain areas that are desperately in need of support, but not likely to impact or reduce any future investment that that is sought for from us that wouldn't be already restricted by our limited supply versus our high demand.
Thank you so much.
I do not see any further questions from the committee, so thank you. We do have some additional favorable in-person.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and welcome aboard, Madam Assistant Secretary.
Thank you.
We have Claudia Wilson Randall, Community Development Network of Maryland, Mark Anthony Thomas, Greater Baltimore Committee, Wanda Best from the Upton Planning Committee, Trish Swanson from Care First Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Shanetta Martin, Maryland Philanthropy Network. You all might need to sub in and out of the mics a little bit, but you can all make your way to the front, and whoever's ready can just go ahead and get started. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. You have my written testimony. My name is Claudia Wilson Randall. I am the Executive Director of the Community Development Network of Maryland. I am going to just go off script a little bit. I'm very excited and I want to testify today in support of House Bill 241, which would identify just communities. And I want to compliment the department for bringing the bill forward to target assistance to historically disadvantaged communities throughout the state. Today, as I sit here today testifying, I stand on the shoulders of Harriet Tubman, Gloria Richardson, Victorine Adams in Baltimore City, women who have been working towards justice for their communities in Maryland for hundreds of years. And I would just say that as I go think about this work and think about the need for us to target assistance and undo harms, a long arc of harms done, particularly to the African-American community in the state of Maryland. I think that our zip code still tells the story of most people in the state. And we have to begin to think about how we reverse the persistent lie that if you work hard or go to school, that you can somehow make it and get ahead. Our social mobility index in this state is poor, and we can do better. We're among the wealthiest states in the country and one of the most wealthiest countries in the world. So we have opportunity. more opportunity than many. Housing and community development has been the bedrock of discrimination for our state. And I would just say that I hope Just Communities designation can begin to undo the harms by private and state-sponsored discrimination and dehumanizing policy in the state of Maryland. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please just continue on down the line.
Great. I'm Mark Anthony Thomas. I lead the Greater Baltimore Committee, and we're here in support of this bill. Our state and our region have this unique challenge of both post-industrial economic headwinds and reversing intentional efforts to concentrate poverty. These barriers disproportionately affect Black communities, but they severely disadvantage our highest need places for basic amenities that livable communities enjoy and suppress homegrown entrepreneurship and business expansion and broadly hope. While we didn't alter the current landscape we inherited, the body of solution-focused policies, economic transformation strategies, and tools provide a framework for making the impact that we all want to see. This is the inspiration behind this bill and a comprehensive set of initiatives that is exciting that our state's housing leadership will prioritize this session. Targeting the state's resources to the areas of highest need is sound policy, but it's also important to reorient how we define areas of opportunity and communities in need. We see a greater focus of federal resources and new innovative economic development programs that target hard-hit post-industrial and disadvantaged communities. And now we're seeing our state align with that strategy. The GBC will serve a leadership role in working both with private sector and public sector partners to position our region and our state for competitive opportunities. And we support not just passing this bill, but we'll be an active partner in how we best maximize its potential. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Wanda Best. I'm the Executive Director of the Historic Upton Community, referred to as the Upton Planning Committee, which is the community that Thurgood Marshall grew up in, Congressman Perrin Mitchell, the founder of the Small Business Administration, and some notable others. Thank you for the opportunity to provide important feedback at this critical juncture in our state and nation's history. The Just Communities designation will provide a unique opportunity to address one of the central reasons communities of color, particularly African-American communities, are often not in a position to make meaningful changes in the built environment, specifically housing, retail services, and health. The overall reason is the lack of access to meaningful capital. The lack of access to meaningful capital is one key reason we have such a disparity in the level of quality of development standards of living between African-American communities and that of other communities. One of the most significant reasons disinvested communities remain so is that people who truly care about those communities and have history in those communities very rarely have the ability to get adequately financing to make significant change. One main reason they are not able to obtain meaningful financing to make a major impact on the communities is that the majority of banks and financial institutions require financial guarantees, which in turn require significant assets to satisfy. The majority of the people coming from these communities have ancestors that were once slaves. After slavery came Jim Crow. After Jim Crow came redlining and racist lending policies. One way to change the paradigm is to have the state of Maryland provide the balance sheet guarantee capacity to allow qualified African-American developers work with communities of color to access large pools of capital that would allow them to do development in these neighborhoods they genuinely identify with and make timely major positive impacts.
Thank you so much, Ms. Swanson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tricia Swanson, and I'm the Director of Government Affairs for Care First Blue Cross Blue Shield, here in support of House Bill 241. As a healthcare company, addressing social determinants of health is core to our mission. We care for over 3.5 million people across the region, and they entrust us with their health at some of the most vulnerable points in their lives. And we can't fully support our members and effectively support our members without understanding the social and environmental circumstances that exist in and around their community. Data tells us that these determinants is what affects 80% of someone's health. In particular, Care First serves a high need population. For example, 36% of our members face financial strain. 39% of our members face housing instability. For these reasons, Care First strongly supports House Bill 241 and applauds the work that DHCD is doing to better the lives of Marylanders across the state. Thank you.
And can we make room for Shanette Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for the opportunity to speak to you. Good afternoon. My name is Shanetta Martin. I am the Policy Director for Maryland Philanthropy Network. We are a statewide organization representing over 110 private, family, corporate, and community foundations. Together, our members steward over $9 billion in charitable assets, with approximately $1.1 billion distributed annually to public charities, much of it benefiting Maryland communities. Philanthropy can be a great partner to the state, as grant makers are connected to nonprofits and small community-based organizations that have the expertise and lived experience to drive the solutions to address the challenges and needs of those communities. However, philanthropic dollars cannot fill the gap alone. Public dollars are needed to right the wrongs of long-term disinvestment and to institutionalize long-term reinvestment. We applaud the Moore-Miller administration and their demonstrated commitment to operationalize and actualize an increase in public-private partnerships. Maryland Philanthropy Network is a full partner in that process. To ground this issue, MPN has a significant number of members who care about and fund the Baltimore community, which would likely receive a Just Communities designation. What we know is there has been a history of redlining, which started in Baltimore. The socioeconomic landscape of Baltimore reveals what some call the white L and black butterfly, where disinvestment, policies, and practices have led to communities that have not received resources and services ranging from a lack of adequate housing, public schools that are underfunded, neighborhoods that lack amenities, and communities that experience poor social determinants of health. These negative indicators and disparities show up specifically in the black butterfly zone as compared to the white L. Two examples of the philanthropic community at work. In the community development arena, MPN members partner with the Healthy Neighbors Initiative to pool resources of city funds and corporate support and private philanthropy to stem growth in mixed income neighborhoods. Statewide efforts include Endow Maryland, where state tax credits are distributed across the network of community foundations to lead to nonprofit organizations being able to address economic development issues in their communities.
Okay,
We stand in support of this bill.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Any questions for this panel? Okay, I do not see any, but thank you for patiently waiting to testify. We appreciate it. Colleagues, that concludes the bill hearing on HB 241. We will now turn to HB 7. Delegate Stewart, if you have a panel, please bring them up with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of, again, the best committee, I'll keep saying it, in the history of the Maryland General Assembly. For the record, I'm Delegate Vaughn Stewart, and this is House Bill 7. So this bill is a reintroduction, very similar to a bill that we saw last year, and it essentially creates a state fund to reward counties doing innovative things in the area of affordable housing. As we know, as we've heard already today, and as we will continue to hear all session, Maryland is at least 100,000 rental units short of meeting our housing goals. Too many Maryland families are burdened by housing costs, which means they have to pay upwards of 30, 40, or even 50% of their household incomes on housing costs. And no county is perfect. No county candidly is crushing it. A lot, most of our counties are behind on goals. But today we're going to lift up one county in particular, my county, and specifically it's Montgomery County's Housing Opportunities Commission. Now, we're going to hear from the HOC in a little while about what they're doing, and they can explain it a lot better than I can. But essentially, they've been able to take a relatively small amount, emphasis on relatively small amount of county funds and turn it into, by the use of floating their own bonds, eventually yielding thousands of affordable housing units, including a 700-unit complex in my district near the Shady Grove Metro called the Laureate, which has already been built and fully occupied. These are beautiful, mixed income, public-private partnership housing. And they'll get into more of the details, but what HOC has basically been able to do is to replace private equity in the housing finance scheme. And by essentially giving some money to private developers at a lower interest rate, they've been able to buy up higher levels of affordability and also keep these properties permanently in public ownership, where they're able to make sure that forever tenants are treated fairly, they can have a say in their own affairs, and they don't live in moldy and rat-infested units. HOC has gotten a lot of national attention for this. They were actually recently in the New York Times. I didn't know how many of you guys are fellow Times subscribers, so I went ahead and took the liberty of putting that article in the packet, so it should be available on your floor systems. And Montgomery County has also hosted a number of visitors from across the state and across the nation and across the world of all of these wannabe copycats who want to take what we're doing in Montgomery County and bring it to their jurisdictions. And what this bill, HB 7, essentially is saying is the state should help out. We should not only reward Montgomery County and help bolster its efforts, we should also try to incentivize all the other counties to try to be innovative in this space. Maybe that looks like more or less what Montgomery County is doing. Maybe it looks different, but we should have a healthy competition among our counties to see which one of them can build the most affordable housing and not build the least of it. So I will note before I close, there are some amendments you'll see in the packet, and most of them are technical sponsor amendments. There is one amendment that some of the affordable housing folks have talked to me about that I'm open to, which is the idea of, for some rural counties, some smaller counties don't have public housing authorities. So it might be harder for them to receive funds under the bill. I'm sympathetic to that. I, like the governor, want to leave no county behind, even if they don't have a PAH. And so I'm open to maybe tweaking the bill to find a different conduit for funds so that our more rural counties could still apply to DHCD and get some of these matching dollars. We're also going to have an amendment to make sure that, to clarify, that it doesn't necessarily need to be a one-to-one match. I know that, for example, the city of Baltimore's PAH had that amendment in the packet as well. But I also just want to close by putting a little bit of a face on this problem. We talk a lot of numbers and statistics in this committee. We do hear from affected people, but I think maybe too often we actually personalize these things in human terms. And in that New York Times article that's in your packet, it tells the story of one of my constituents. Her name is Irina Skidden. She is a 37-year-old single mom who lives in the Laureate, this new building that HOC constructed and which opened a year or two ago. Irina is a makeup / tattoo artist for chemo patients. She works with cancer patients with using both tattoos and permanent tattoos and temporary makeup to basically make it less obvious that they're losing their hair. That's her job. And during the pandemic, as you might imagine, it was really hard to do this kind of work, and her income was slashed in half. It went from about $60,000 a year to about $30,000 a year. She could no longer afford to rent the townhome she was living in with her two daughters, aged 10 and 6. She didn't know what she could do. She was going to do. She honestly feared that she was going to be put on the street. She knew that she couldn't, when the lease came due, she knew she couldn't renew. She looked all over breathlessly. She actually made this huge Excel spreadsheet that the New York Times article talks about, all the columns. She listed all of these different opportunities to maybe find affordable housing in the county or throughout the state. She called around for hours. This took months. She couldn't find a place. She literally thought that her and her two daughters would be on the street in the wake of the pandemic, until she learned about the laureate. She applied. Fortunately, by the grace of God, she was accepted and she was given a unit there. She is now paying $1,900 a month, which is $1,100 less than she would pay at market rate. These are the levels of deep affordability reductions that HOC is able to provide with this innovative financing scheme. And with those extra dollars, Irina is putting them towards her own financial and educational future. She's enrolled in Montgomery College, where she wants to be a software designer. And she's also provided more stability for her two kids who otherwise would have had to leave their school jurisdiction. There are other tenants, HOC laureate tenants that are mentioned in the article. You should definitely read it, who, for example, said that the laureate was the first opportunity for their children to get their bedrooms, their own bedrooms. Previously, they were either sleeping with their parents or sleeping in the living room. And I think also crucially, and this happens a lot, folks were able to get a spot in the laureate to make sure that their children with special needs were able to go to schools where they had additional supports for them. So I think in conclusion that HB 7 is a really, really important step to rewarding counties who are literally providing life-changing units. We talk a lot about the numbers here, but I think there are human beings associated here with every number we cite. And every unit of affordable housing that we can create has the ability to completely change their life forever. I think it's time for the state to start rewarding counties that are doing this life-changing work, and I urge a favorable report. And actually, Mr. Chair, if I could ask Hannah to go next. Hannah is a high school student in Montgomery County, and she's just going to speak very briefly.
Hello, committee members. I'm Hannah Choi, a senior at Winston Churchill High School in Montgomery. I've canvassed a lot with community members within Montgomery County, and I've heard a lot of stories about people talking about rent increases as well as their poor housing conditions. And I remember talking to one Vietnam veteran who was talking about how he was almost on the brink of homelessness because of the constant increases in rent prices. And that just saddened me a lot because, in the future, I do want to settle down in Maryland and raise my own kids here. But I think it'll be increasingly difficult to do that in terms of the worsening housing conditions as well. And so I think this housing bill will be a good solution for not only the present, but also the future. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Hannah, and go Bulldogs. Dan?
All right. Hi again. My name is Dan Reed. I'm with Greater Washington, and we support House Bill 7, which creates a sustainable funding source for affordable housing. And it's been said several times today that we are in a significant housing shortage, and it's a big enough problem that we need big enough solutions. And subsidized income restricted affordable housing is a big part of that solution, but financing is a recurring barrier. And this bill, I think, rises to that challenge. Public ownership ensures that revenue from rent can be used to finance additional projects. And as Delegate Stewart noted, this model has allowed Montgomery County's Housing Opportunities Commission to build 700 homes and has another 2,000 units in development pipeline. I really can't stress enough, as someone who works for a nonprofit that advocates on housing issues and is connected to organizations all over the country, how much people are talking about this. Someone had me for lunch last week, and all she wanted to talk about, she's in DC, is how can DC replicate this? Just last night, I was invited to speak at a conference in Texas about this, right? And I'm still figuring out how to explain it because this thing is really cool, but also very complicated. It is life-changing, right? I lived in income restricted housing in Montgomery County. It was my first home as an adult in Montgomery County, not through this program, but through the MPDU program. It was life-changing. It is the only reason I could live in Montgomery County, the county where I grew up in. It is the only reason I could stay in Montgomery County and be able to afford to buy my own home there. So I would urge the committee to give this favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you all. Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate, I really liked your bill. I really like the idea of rewarding counties that are innovative with respect to their housing policies. My question is, would you consider broadening your amendment to include any county that doesn't have a housing authority? For example, Baltimore County, they have a housing office, but no public housing, so they have no PHA. So just wanted to put that idea out there.
In short, yes. In fact, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that I did not even know that about Baltimore County. But yes, absolutely. We want to make this something that spurs innovation. We want to make this a pool of money that spurs kind of the laboratories of democracy within our state, which are the counties, to try to outcompete each other. And we don't want them not to be able to do so if they don't have a PHA. And we don't want them to have to stand up an entire PHA in just a few years in order to compete for the funds. So yeah, definitely happy to talk those amendments through with you.
Great, thank you.
Sorry, maybe you can educate me as a new member of the committee. So they have a housing office. This is for public housing authorities. Is there a reason that some counties that are the size of Baltimore County and Montgomery County have one or the other?
Mostly historical. I mean, I think basically
Okay, welcome back. We are going to continue the hearing on HB 7. I'm told the Y2K bug was making a late comeback there. So why don't we just go to Delegate Terrace who had a question? Delegate Stewart, you can talk about my inquiry offline.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Delegate Stewart, I love this idea. I have followed some of the innovative things that Montgomery County has done for years, and it has been a model. So two questions for you. One is, does this go along with a requirement for a certain amount of affordable housing? My understanding is Montgomery County has a requirement for a certain percentage of affordable housing.
The answer is yes. And yes, you're correct about that. So I want to distinguish between two different programs. Montgomery County led the nation when it created what was called the Moderately Priced Dwelling Unit Program, the MPDU program in the 1970s. We became the first county in the nation to require that a certain percentage of new private sector housing had some level of affordable units. And Montgomery County, depending on what part of the county you're talking about, it's either 12.5% or 15% MPDUs. What HOC is doing is a little different. It's supercharging that. Instead of essentially requiring private developers to require a certain amount of affordable housing, HOC is working with private developers to create public housing that is double or maybe even sometimes even more than doubly more affordable than MPDU. So the Laureate, for example, I think is about 30% affordable. And so that's around the level of affordability I think we're requiring in the bill to meet is about 30%, or if not a little bit higher in affordability. And we have some other parameters in the bill too, like giving priority to buildings that are built sustainably, near transit, with prevailing wages, et cetera. So we really think that these that HOC is checking a lot of boxes, and that overall this fund provides an opportunity for us as a state to invest not only in renters who need shelter, but also workers who need jobs and a planet that needs saving.
So this is exactly the formula we need for affordable housing from my perspective, is both the requirement and a fund for innovation like that. So my other question is pretty simple. You keep saying this packet and there's a time article and amendments. I don't see those, or I may be just.
I would point you to your
not
floor system. You're going to have to log in
I am
with your
already?
username and password. You then go into the top left corner and there are 3 dashes. If you click that, it'll have a search bar that you can put in the number. You're going to write HB7. My bill will come up with my beautiful last name. In the top right-hand corner, it'll say committee testimony. Click on that. And then you're going to scroll down to my name alphabetically. It'll be in the S's, and I'll have 2 entries. One will be my testimony and one will be the New York Times article. You guys see that? Okay. All right.
Well, apparently I'm just remembering this from last year. So thank you for that.
Yep.
Okay.
I should have.
Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Delegate Stewart. I love this bill as well. I was just curious since Delegate Stein raised the issue about Baltimore County situation, and I'm reading through the bill. I can't tell how you would treat a local housing authority. Like I have a housing authority in my district in College Park, a city housing authority. Where do they fit in?
Yeah, I think they're included. I think all public housing authorities, including, I keep saying counties because it's usually the county that does it. And that's the most kind of familiar entity. But I do know that some cities, including, I think the city of Annapolis has its own housing authority too. They're included.
Okay, because there are places where you say the local government, but then there are other places where you specify the word county, which is a little bit confusing. So,
Yeah, we can clean that up.
yeah, if you could, that would be helpful.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
certainly want our cities, to be able to participate in this as well. And some actually municipal public housing authorities are pretty sophisticated.
Right. Thank you.
Yep,
Thank you,
thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Great. I do not see any further questions. We do have additional, thank you, Delegate Stewart.
Thank
and your
you.
Witnesses, we have additional in-person favorable testimony. I'll call up Lisa May from the Maryland Realtors, Claudia Wilson Randall from the Community Development Network of Maryland, Dominic Butchko from Maryland Association of Counties, and Jim Driscoll from Climate Coalition Montgomery County, as well as Gregory Countess from Maryland Legal Aid. You might just have to swap around to make enough room for everybody. But Lisa, why don't you go ahead and get us started?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Lisa May with the Maryland Realtors. I was going to do another hearty ditto testimony, but something that Delegate Stewart said inspired me, which is that right now we have been rewarding those who produce the least amount of housing. And we have been racing to the bottom. And that's a race that Maryland, by and large, has been winning. One statistic has us the 8th lowest in the country in terms of housing production. I'll be generous and use the stat that I had, which is that we are the 11th lowest in the rate of housing production in the country. And if we hope to change that, if we hope to build the housing that we need, we can't keep doing the same thing and hope for different results. We do need to try new things. We do need to innovate. And this is a way that we can do so. And therefore, we offer our support for this bill.
Let's keep going on down the line.
Good afternoon. I think I agree with Lisa in the hearty ditto. But I also really want to emphasize the need for building housing is an expensive problem. but we have got to put our back into it and come up with some innovative ideas and innovative financing and ways in which we can actually accelerate the amount of production. I think it's really critical also for other areas that Maryland wants to be ahead in terms of jobs and attracting economic development to the state. We're going to have to figure out strategies that local governments and the development community need that are more flexible, that preserve affordable housing across the state, and that work to invest in the intersection between housing and other challenges that the state has. So with that, I ask your favorable report for House Bill 7, and I'll turn it over to Dom.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dom with Mako. I'm going to keep this short. This hearing is going great. Let's reward counties who do the right thing, more resources, and let's get this housing problem solved. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, my name is Jim Driscoll, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the Climate Coalition of Montgomery County. I just wanted to point out that this is a coalition of 21 organizations, 19 of whom specifically endorse this particular bill. And it's unusual, you know, for climate groups to be getting behind a social justice move like this reflects work we've been doing around a Green New Deal that in order to make progress, frankly, on climate justice, we're going to have to bring together the mostly white climate movement with the larger social justice community. We had a committee for a Green New Deal we met about a year ago, and social housing was the one approach that we focused on that brings together kind of the climate crisis and the housing crisis that we've heard so much about today. And we're going to have these kind of win-win situations. And I just want you to kind of note that you have a whole lot of climate organizations supporting a housing bill, because we know we're going to have a different set of housing arrangements as we go forward dealing with the climate crisis. And this bill in particular, you've heard, gives a source of funding that is going to help us address that, and also maintains public control so that we can have things that Delegate Stewart talked about in terms of green construction, resilience, transit-centric, and the like. So speaking in behalf of those organizations, I just wanted to urge you to support this bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Gregory Countess. I'm from Maryland Legal Aid Bureau. I'd like to say greetings to you, Mr. Chair, and to Vice Chair Boyce. The problem can't be overstated. You have the statistics. You've had a lot of testimony detailing the need, but if I could put a personal face on it again, in the testimony that Legal Aid produced, you see the cost burden renters spend 57% less on healthcare and 17% less on food. And I had a client who this directly affected. She worked 10 to 12 hours a day. This was a job that she just got in the past a few months. And her take-home pay for a 2-week period, a time of work, was $1,000. That was not enough for her to pay her rent. And she told me often, as she tried to gather this money to pay the rent, we used all of the tools that we had legally to slow the eviction train down. And what happened to her and what she said to me is this: you know, it's hard for me to feed my kids, but I have to pay this rent. And if you can magnify her by whether it be 85,000 families, 96,000 families, or more threatening, 145,000 families. And that's a story that a lot of kids are going to go to bed with tonight. A lot of parents are wrestling with. And this is needed yesterday. And so I thank Delegate Stewart for again bringing this bill. And we'd ask this committee to vote favorably on this bill.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this panel? Do not see any, but thank you all for testifying. We will turn to some virtual favorable testimony. We have Jordan Backham Colbert from Maryland National Capital Park and Planning. We can start with her.
Sorry, my computer was on mute. Can you hear me now? Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello? You can hear me?
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman, Vice Chair. Again, my name is Jordan Backham Colbert. I'm with the Park and Planning Commission and Working Government Affairs. Our board has voted yes in support of this bill, and we also have written testimony for the record. It's important to note that the commission has also been working with the sponsors to support these goals, and I'll just be short. We support the commission strongly supports the goal of this bill during the critical time of housing shortage. Our public housing authorities are key partners in the development of deeply affordable housing. With an aging public house stock, it is even more important and critical that we continue to invest in the redevelopment and new construction of mixed communities. With regards to matching funds, we ask for clarification. While many large public housing authorities are able to self-finance projects, many smaller authorities across the state obtain project funding from various sources. And while we fully support this bill, the commission encourages the sponsor and the committee to consider clarifying the bill's language, such as the dollar-to-dollar match, so that it may be from any source to ensure that these funds are leveraged fully throughout the state as indicated in our written testimony. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. We'll turn to Shanice Bamiro, Prosperity Now. Please go ahead.
All right. Thank you again for the opportunity to provide testimony from your committee. My name is Shanice Bamiro, and again, I'm the State and Local Policy Manager at Prosperity Now. I'm testifying in support of House Bill 7, the Housing Innovations Pilot Program Act of 2024. HB 7 provides a key part of the answer to Maryland's affordable housing crisis. Mixed income housing is seen as an intentional way to create diverse communities where residents, regardless of income, can have access to safe neighborhoods and quality amenities. However, funding is a barrier to building mixed income housing developments. This includes land costs, permitting, and the cost of labor and materials, which has seen a steep increase in the last 3 years. Providing a source of funding for public housing authorities to take on these developments can increase the housing stock and create affordable mixed income housing. Thank you for your time, and I urge you to vote favorably on House Bill 7. Thank you.
Thank you both. Do we have any questions for these favorable witnesses? I do not see any. We have some favorable with amendment witnesses in the room who I will now call up. Miranda Williams from the Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition and Chelsea Andrews from the Housing Opportunity Commission of Montgomery County.
Good afternoon again. Miranda Darden-Willems, Executive Director of the Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition. I am here in favor of HB 7 with some proposed amendments that are outlined in our written testimony. As you've heard, Montgomery County's Housing Authority has been at the forefront of developing innovative mixed income housing. They have the financial capacity and expertise to develop these non-traditional housing products, and they work well in urban areas. However, they are the only county in the state that I know of with broad financial support from their local government. HB 7 would provide matching funds to housing authorities to develop innovative affordable housing, but it gives a preference for projects that are not using low-income housing tax credits or bonds. And these are the two primary sources used by both private developers and housing authorities across the country to develop affordable housing. So essentially, no other housing authority in the state would be able to be awarded these funds as proposed. We do support state programs that provide funding for our local governments and housing authorities, which is already done through DHCD's partnership program. And we encourage you to ensure that other jurisdictions across the state can access the program so it doesn't all go to one county. We appreciate and support the great work that HOC is doing, but the state should prioritize programs that can be used statewide to create more affordable housing units. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the committee. I am Chelsea Andrews, and I'm the president of the Housing Opportunities Commission of Montgomery County. We are the housing authority as well as the housing finance agency and a public developer. We are strong supporters of Delegate Stewart's proposed housing innovation pilot program because it would create a powerful new statewide financing tools for public entities and spur additional housing across our state. I will be brief and provide some context on how this type of pilot program could be a mighty tool to support mixed income development across the state. In 2021, as previously stated, we partnered with our county government to create a $100 million revolving housing production fund. It provides 5-year construction financing, which you all know is extremely expensive, for new mixed income housing. This fund will create over 6,000 units in 20 years. To put it in scale, for every $10 million, HOC can partner with a private developer and build approximately 150 mixed income inclusive homes in each revolution. 30% affordable, which our board always pushes for more, and 70% market rate. Over 20 years, that will be 600 new homes for one $10 million investment, and the fund will continue in perpetuity. The first turn of our local fund is now fully allocated, and we have over 37,000 individuals on our waiting list. Having additional resources from the state would allow us and other counties to do more, and there are so many who are counting on us to do just that. The best part is that our HPF fund and Introduce Pilot program.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very familiar. Appreciate you being here, but we're going to stick with the time limit. Any questions for this panel? Okay. Thank you both again. That concludes the bill hearing on HB 7. Colleagues, we are going to jump to House Bill 93, Delegate Miraku North, who's waiting in the back. And if you have a panel, please go ahead and bring them up. Delegate Miraku North, House Bill 93.
For the panel, and it looks like she was expecting a text from us as to when we were ready, and she's on the Senate side, but we can start with these two, I believe. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman Corman, Madam Vice Chair Boyce, and the esteemed members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. This is my first time here, so I feel a little bit of a newbie here. But I come before you today, I, Delegate Bernice Miraku North, testify in favor of House Bill 93, Landlord-Tenant Termination of Residential Lease, Limited Liability for Rent. This is a critical step in making sure that we are seeking parity in rental housing protections for those with mental health conditions as well as physical. There is a concern on how to address mental health when it comes to renters. So this bill is really seeking to help folks who, for instance, have bipolar disorder and have a deterioration of their mental health and have to break their lease because they have a job loss. This bill is seeking to help the college student that's had a mental health crisis and has to return home. This bill is seeking to help the single mother who's facing job loss due to mental health conditions and those similarly situated. Now, I'm hoping that you're able to listen to the testimony and the stories from the Legal Aid and Public Justice Center because they really provide some, at least in their written testimony, very clear examples of why this bill is needed. This bill updates existing law, Real Property Code 8-212.2, in that if a tenant with a qualifying mental disorder needs to terminate their lease early, they'll be required to submit a written certification from a physician, counselor, or therapist, or psychologist licensed in Maryland. Liability for payment will be limited to 2 months of rents, similar to those that have a physical disability. Nothing else would change in the tenant's responsibilities in the current statute. Currently, it's the landlord's discretion to address mental health issues. I've heard some stories of those that have submitted a notice from a doctor saying one's medical condition requires them to leave their rental property, and that's been obliged. Some have not had that success. So this bill is creating a standardized method of dealing with this issue. Now, the how on how to address mental health is something we're currently working through. I did read the Board of Counselors and Therapists position, and I've since contacted them, and they are reconsidering their position of different from what's already been provided to you in your paperwork. We're currently working through basically why counselors and therapists should or should not be part of this list. But the bottom line is we're really making sure that we're addressing the mental health reasoning. So that's not really in dispute. It's more just coming down of figuring out who's going to write that doctor's note, whether we're going to expand to therapists and counselors and psychologists, or just limited to psychologists and currently physicians. We are flexible, and I've been working with the Senate sponsor on that as well, trying to sort out what the list of professionals are going to be. So with that, I did provide some amendments, including removing intellectual and developmental disabilities from the bill. After conversations with one of the stakeholders, the ARC, that is what led us to amend this bill, seek amendment of this bill to remove them from the bill. We're also adding, this is before meeting with talking with the Board of Counselors and Therapists, we were wanting to add counselors as another kind of mental health professional to provide the certification. And we also amended the standard. We're also seeking an amendment for the standard of receiving the limited liability that satisfies hopefully a landlord's needs and prioritizes and protects the needs of the HIPAA rights of the tenant. And that is because a patient has a medical condition that is a mental disorder that causes the continued habitation of the leased premises to be unfeasible or unsustainable for the patient, or requires the patient to move to a home, facility, or institution to obtain a higher level of care than can be provided at the leased premises. And that particular amendment was actually having conversations with the Multi-Housing Association folks. And so we are trying to work across the aisle as best of our abilities to make sure that this bill is addressing the current needs of those suffering from mental health that are renters. Now, Nevada is one state that does consider mental disability as a reason to terminate lease. They require tenants to give a 30-day notice, no particular reimbursement for the landlord, except for the fact that they are required to get that 1 month's rent. But in Maryland, the limited liability started off with active to the military, 30 days rent as the liability. Nearly 20 years ago, that was expanded to physical disabilities. Liability was 2 months rent. Now, this bill is simply just asking us to include mental health in the same way we can include physical health. So I'm asking for a favorable report for HB 93. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, my name is Matt Hill. I'm an attorney at the Public Justice Center. And I think the last thing the delegate said was right on point, which is just we're trying to bring mental health disabilities into the same law where we currently allow tenants to limit their liability for physical disabilities. It's really that simple. One quick example for why this bill is important. A colleague recently had a case with a University of Maryland college student who was having a mental health crisis, a severe mental health crisis, had to withdraw from their school. Her father tried to negotiate a accommodation to let the student out of the lease. The landlord ignored the request. And right now, the law is not going to help that father or that student. If you pass this bill, it does. It allows that limitation of liability for the rent for severe mental health conditions. It's that simple, and so we ask for a favorable report.
Excuse me. Again, Mr. Chair, Ms. Vice Chair, my name is Gregory Countess. I'm with Maryland Legal Aid. I'd like to say me too. Basically what this bill does is it limits potential liability, which may in fact be a potential barrier to the future housing of that particular person who through no fault of their own is sick. This is fair. This is just right. And just as someone who is physically ill, someone who has a mental disability is also disabled, and it treats those folks fairly. And so we would urge a favorable report for House Bill 93. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Teresa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Love this bill. I think it's wonderful. I'm just wondering if you had any comments on the ARC's comments about removing the reference to intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Yes, and thank you, Delegate Tessera, about that bill, that particular feedback. So I've been talking with the ARC for the last couple of weeks about it, and the reason why we ultimately decided to remove from the bill is that they were really concerned about this stigma and the fear that if this is out there, that those intellectual disabilities or developmental disabilities get a chance to be removed from their lease and break their lease, landlords won't rent to them. That was a huge, huge concern repeated throughout our conversations. And I took a step back and said, well, the real purpose are the examples I mentioned, is those people that suddenly have a deterioration in their mental health. And honestly, adding those two categories was my attempt to be over-inclusive. But when I realized, okay, well, that's actually doing more harm than good, that's what we ended up removing from the bill. So I'm in full agreement with the ARC's explanation on that. And so that's why the amendments that we are offering the committee is removing intellectual and developmental disabilities from the group of folks that are eligible for this relief. Okay.
Not let up anymore. Oh, thank you.
Sure.
So are you saying you are taking that out?
Yes, that was the one that I'm going to propose.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Sure.
Great. Before I get to my colleagues' questions, I have a question in 3 parts.
Sure. Of course.
Delegate American North, I'm just
Chair.
kidding. Welcome to the Environment
No,
Transportation Committee.
I'm ready for you. I'm from Ways and Means, so I'm ready for the questions.
Yeah. Do any of my colleagues have actual questions? I think you're gonna have to raise your hand, so I'm gonna. Delegate Long.
Delegate, first of all, thank you for being here. Love the bill. I'm not sure if you addressed this already, so if you did, I apologize. Did you address the letter from the Department of Health already? I'm just curious to.
Yes, the Board of Counseling Therapists, yes, I did. And literally as of probably 12 o'clock today, we've been having conversations on the fact it comes down to 2 things. One, counseling therapists have a different degree of expertise compared to those who have MDs. And that's one thing we've been talking about. And we just need to all come together and say, okay, well, that's something that we need to consider and move it or not. But we just didn't get to that point in time for the hearing. But we are having conversations about it. I was delighted to hear that they were reconsidering their position after I kind of talked through, who would be impacted by this bill. If you have a student, let's say, that goes, sees their therapist and suddenly they're realizing, okay, this rental situation is not working out. Are you now asking them to go ahead and make an appointment with the physician or their primary care physician just to, so we're literally having discussions as we speak. I think give it a day or two, we'll sort out how to address that. But thank you for that question. Sure.
Great. I do not see any other questions. The only other favorable witness, Delegate American North, was Morgan Mills. Do you know?
Yeah, I think unfortunately she is.
Yep, she made it over.
You made it. Okay.
Come on up.
All right, come on over. Yes, no problem.
Sorry.
Okay, wonderful.
Man.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Please go ahead.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, and distinguished members of this committee. My name is Morgan Mills, here today on behalf of NAMI Maryland. We represent a network of over 58,000 people across the state. You have our written testimony, but today I wanted to share the story of a NAMI member who lived in Howard County. She writes, I battled with major depressive and generalized anxiety disorders that altered the course of my existence. Eventually, I received a bipolar disorder diagnosis. Upon receiving this diagnosis, I attempted to end my life, and my mental health quickly declined. I found myself incapacitated, unable to maintain gainful employment. The toll on my mental health was such that I became unemployed, creating a cascade of challenges related to my financial responsibilities. Basic daily living activities became monumental hurdles. Simple tasks like personal hygiene, cooking, and taking care of myself became increasingly difficult. The struggle extended beyond the mental and emotional realm and manifested in tangible ways. One of the most significant challenges was the necessity to vacate my apartment. Despite presenting documentation of my diagnosis to the leasing department, I was required to continue paying rent until the end of my lease, even though I was no longer residing in the premises. This added financial strain exacerbated an already difficult situation. I had no choice but to seek refuge with my family, as living independently was no longer feasible. This journey has been challenging, marked by moments of despair and uncertainty. I just want to note someone's access to housing can affect and in turn is affected by their mental health. Mental illness can develop or worsen at any time. And so it is only just that the law offers those with mental illness the same protections that it does for physical ailments and impairments as it pertains to being liable for rent should they need to vacate due to their illness. And for those reasons, we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not see any questions. So thank you, Delegate America North, you and your panel.
Thank
We
you.
have a few in-person favorable with amendment witnesses if they're here. Aaron Greenfield representing MMHA and Catherine Howard representing the regional management.
Okay, great. I'm seeing it. Okay. I'm gonna hang out with you. Hey, how are you?
See you again.
Good to see you again. Good afternoon. Erin is over in the Senate and I am here doing duty for both my client, Regional Management, Inc., for whom I am general counsel, and also for the Maryland Multi-Housing Association, while I am their one of their committee chairs for legislative services. We are in favorable with amendments, and we have been speaking to the sponsor of the bill regularly, and we think that we can reach an agreement. We have put in written testimony both for RMI and for MMHA. You have it in your packets. I do want to say that although there are a lot of landlords out there who admittedly do not necessarily take these kinds of problems and make them something that allows the tenant to leave and have no liability for the rest of the lease. There are a lot of people like RMI who have clauses in their lease for quote unquote emergency termination clauses, and also working with professionals, doctors, and therapists who are there to assist determining whether or not the tenant can continue the lease and continue to be responsible for that. We take all of these situations very seriously, and we really do try to meet in the middle to make it easy for both the landlord and the tenant to part ways in a way that is not going to be traumatic for either the tenant or to the landlord or the other tenants that are around the building.
Great. Vice Chair Boyce.
Kathy Howard, are you suggesting essentially a clause in the lease that would make both the tenant and landlord whole? In other words, it's an emergency and maybe they get to, I don't know, keep the security deposit or something, but it allows them to get out of the lease and get out of the space.
I think that we have not really talked about what that would look like in a lease. I think that if there is a statute, as the sponsor has indicated, with some of these points being ironed out, that then the landlords and the tenants will then find a way to comply with that law in the lease language. I don't think that there's necessarily a one size fits all that I could give you today, but there may be something that once this is ironed out with all of these amendments, then we can figure that out.
Hopefully we can come up with something.
I'm sure we will.
Thank you so much.
I do not see any other questions for this panel, so thank you.
All right, thank you all.
both.
Thank you very much.
The bill hearing HB 93 will now turn to HB 143 from our own Delegate Foley.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask my panel to come up? Okay. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. No, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair and wonderful members of the ENT Committee. For the record, I'm Delegate Linda Foley, and I'm presenting House Bill 143, Condominiums Sales Contract Asbestos Disclosure, which would establish the requirement that contracts for sale of condominium units contain certain notice relating to the presence of asbestos. HB 43 would amend the real property article, but it is a notice bill. I note that this bill passed the House last year by a vote of 135 to nothing. After it was reported favorably, listen to this, unanimously by the Economic Matters Committee. So that sets the bar for this committee, right? We can do that too. It did not get a vote in the Senate last year, unfortunately, but this year a hearing has already been held on a cross-filed bill. It was held, as a matter of fact, today in JPR. The reason HB 143 is needed relates to the proven impact asbestos has on human health and the environment. And I'm not going to go into a lot of that, but let me just say that for single family home sales, there are some requirements of disclosure of asbestos and asbestos remediation, but for the sale of condominiums, there currently is not. And in the context of real estate contracts, if you've looked at older properties, finding out about an asbestos remediation on the property late in the real estate transaction could have serious consequences and could jeopardize the completion of the transaction. House Bill 143 would ensure that any asbestos remediation would be disclosed and made available to any potential purchaser of condominium dwellings well before they get to settlement. I could go into all the horrors of asbestos exposure. It has been mined and used in many products worldwide. In the United States, mining asbestos has ended, but asbestos is still present in older homes and buildings, specifically those built before 1989. There is an amendment that I did submit to the committee. I believe it's in your packet. And this comes up upon request of CAI Maryland, representing homeowners and condominium associations around the state. I submitted the amendment that would clarify the requirements with respect to common areas. And it would require that if the condominium building was built before August 25, 1989, there should be a statement that asbestos might be present in materials used in construction, repair of, or in components or facilities of the condominium. This complies with US EPA protocol for asbestos. I did check with the Maryland Department of Environment and its asbestos division, who determined that HB 143 does not add any remediation or abatement requirements to the existing state and federal regulations. MDE has been regulating asbestos since the 1980s. And with all of that, I humbly ask for a favorable report on HB 143, just like the Economic Matters Committee did last year on HB 52, I think it was. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you. You want to just go, whoever. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Karen Strawn, and I'm with the Office of the Attorney General Consumer Protection Division. And we are here in support of House Bill 143 because it is a measure that will help to protect people who are purchasing a condominium, to ensure that they are aware of anyone having actual knowledge as to the presence of asbestos in the premises or in the common elements. If you just make the individual aware of it, then they can make the determination that they need to make and know whether it is right for them to purchase that property. It's an important bill because all of the medical problems that are associated with asbestos are horrific. And this will allow an individual who is purchasing a home to know not only what is happening in that actual unit, but what's happening in the common elements. The common elements is something that only the Council of Unit Owners would probably have actual knowledge of unless it has occurred while that individual was living there. And so we feel this is a good bill. We feel this is something that you should support. And we thank you for allowing us to testify.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the committee. My name is Jose Coronado Flores. I'm a policy analyst with the organization CASA, Maryland's largest immigrant advocacy and services organization. We're here in support of HB 143 because this helps address housing conditions, particularly with asbestos exposure. Though our membership is overwhelmingly renters, this doesn't mean that they're only in apartment communities or single family homes, but they also sublet condos. So this critical information when a subletter goes into a contract makes the difference in knowing whether the home is safe or not. And if it's had asbestos, has asbestos been treated, compared to somebody going into a contract without knowledge and the potential health risks. A single fiber of asbestos inhaled can lead to long-term pulmonary issues, and the immigrant community already has trouble accessing healthcare and issues going to the doctor and paying for it. So another reason that they're getting sick should not be due to asbestos exposure. We're fighting for a Maryland where everybody has safe and healthy housing, and this bill is aligned with that mission, which is why we say urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions about this bill that passed unanimously out of the House last year? Okay, thank you very much, Delegate Foley. Is Lisa May still here from the Maryland Realtors?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you again, Lisa May with Maryland Realtors. Last year, we had asked for some amendments to this bill just to narrow the scope of what a unit owner is required to disclose, just to reflect information that they might reasonably be able to obtain. This bill, as introduced, includes those amendments. And while I have not personally read the other proposed amendments, I feel confident in saying that as long as those amendments adhere to that principle of making sure that the unit owner discloses only information that they can provide, that they would receive our hearty support. And therefore, we ask for your support of the bill.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. We have one in-person favorable with amendment, Grayson Wiggins. Hopefully he's caught his breath.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Grayson Wiggins here on behalf of CAI Maryland. Delegate Foley, thank you for bringing the bill and thank you for doing a wonderful job explaining the amendment. She met with us prior to the hearing. And so we think it's a good amendment that will just provide more blanket notice as opposed to notice contingent upon actual knowledge. And with that, Mr. Chair, we'd ask that the amendment be added and the bill be moved. Thank you.
Great. Do we have any questions? Okay, that concludes the bill hearing on HB 143. Do we have Delegate Lewis with us? Oh, there she is. Delegate Lewis, House Bill 13.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, esteemed colleagues. Delegate Robin Lewis here in my second favorite committee. On behalf of House Bill 13, thank you so much for making time for me to return to come before you with a bill that you passed essentially unanimously last year out of this committee, and that further passed the House unanimously 137-0. Should I go on? Should I?
I would be very brief, given that wind up.
So this is a great bill. It's a simple bill. It will help increase the access to Maryland families for affordable housing, the type of housing that they can own and build family wealth through a community land trust. This bill eliminates a loophole in our current affordable land trust law that would essentially force a land trust to spend maybe double the amount of money it would cost to develop a multifamily property than it would if we fix this loophole. So for those of you who are on the real estate committee with the distinguished Delegate Holmes, you might nerd out on this, but I honestly think that what's most essential to understand is this is a technical bill. It fixes a problem that's an obstacle to accessing affordable housing. And by passing this bill, you'll make more Maryland families homeowners. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate.
sponsor panel as well. I'm
Why don't you
sorry, I
bring 'em
didn't
on up?
call them. Yes, Claudia Wilson Randall, Will Green, Daniel Ehrenberg, please come up. I should have called them. Forgive me.
No problem. I'll just mention Daniel Ehrenberg signed up for as written, but if he's
Oh,
here, we
okay.
can take
He's
him.
here and.
If
Mr.
he's here, we
Ehrenberg-
can take him.
Yeah, he's great with questions if needed. Thanks for being here.
And are Will Green or Claudia Wilson Randall still here? Thank you. Please go ahead, sir.
So it's okay for Mr. Ehrenberg to read his testimony. Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Well, I wouldn't read it, but if you want to present oral
Yeah.
testimony, please
No.
do.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and esteemed members of the committee. My name is Dan Ehrenberg. I'm a board member of the Community Development Network of Maryland. I'm a resident of Kent County, and I'm also an affordable housing attorney. This bill, as Delegate Lewis said, is a technical fix. Affordable Housing Land Trusts, there was an act that got enacted in 2010. What they are is private nonprofits that develop, own, and then shepherd low and moderate income families to keep affordable housing affordable in perpetuity. Now, in order to pass the original bill, what needed to happen, because the way that the land trusts work is that they own the land, they lease the land to the homeowner, and the homeowner owns the house. And the lease is a 99-year lease. And so that's considered in Maryland as a ground lease. However, the difference is that this lease is to keep the house in affordable in perpetuity. So therefore, when the original bill was passed, Affordable Housing Land Trust were exempted from ground lease requirements and restrictions. The one thing that became an oversight is that they did not do that for residential condominiums under the Residential Condominium Act. Basically, what the bill says is that leasehold estates cannot be used for a residential condominium. However, a land trust holds the land in perpetuity, and by not allowing it to do a residential condominium, then it becomes a much more costly and time-consuming process. So I ask you, again, make a favorable report on HB 13. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Claudia Wilson Randall, Community Development Network, Maryland. Thank you so much. I just want to thank Dan Ehrenberg for his testimony on the complexities of this particular technical amendment to the land trust law. This bill was passed the House last year without controversy, and I hope we can pass it again. It is House Bill 13. I just want to say that community land trusts are quite a really good tool for preserving affordability over the long term. And so as we have discussed throughout the day, there is an urgent need for affordable housing across the state. And so this is one tool that is critical and could be used to help address the urgent need for affordable housing in Maryland. And I think community land trusts offer an excellent opportunity to create more affordable housing. I respectfully request your favorable report for House Bill 13, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Delegate Lewis and your panel. Delegate Holmes, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for the sponsor of the bill and for the gentleman to your left there. You mentioned ground rents. I just wanted to ask you, sir, and sponsor of the bill, were ground rents established on June 20th, 1632 by King Charles I?
May I take that question? Yes, they were.
Thank you very much.
Ditto.
Could say me too.
Excellent testimony. Okay, thank you. That concludes the bill hearing on HB 13. We will now turn to Delegate Charkoudian, HB 139. And you can bring up your panel if you have them. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, what a thrill to say that. And colleagues, for the record, Delegate Lori Cherkudian. And I'm here asking for a favorable report on House Bill 139. But I'm actually going to ask for it in a very different posture than the bill that you actually have in front of you. So what I'd like to do is to share with you what the issue is. I'll spare you the history of how we ended up with a bill that isn't quite right, and I'll just ask you to indulge me and work with me while I fix it. So big picture history of it is the big picture issue is this. Many people in Maryland are energy burdened, which means that they pay way more than 6% of their income towards energy. And it's a huge problem as it relates to electricity cutoffs and utility cutoffs. And you don't usually have that conversation here. We have that conversation in ECM. But for people who pay their utilities as part of their rent, their energy burden turns into a housing burden, because when energy prices go up, rent goes up because they're paying their utilities as part of their rent. And so it's really important. And we have a system that allows the people who pay their utilities as part of their rent, we have a system that allows them to also get energy assistance, so that when energy costs go up, their rents go up, they can get some of the assistance that they would get if they were paying their own bill directly. So that's the good news. We've got that straight in Maryland between the federal money and the state money. All that's good. The challenge is a lot of times people have trouble getting the paperwork from their landlord to fill out the paperwork and to be able to get access to this money. Many landlords in the state cooperate. Many landlords operate in good faith. Many landlords really appreciate having this program because it means their renters are able to pay their rent more. Low-income renters are able to pay their rent more often. But we hear of two issues that have happened. One is we do hear of landlords who don't cooperate. And the second is we've heard of renters who are afraid of retaliation from their landlords if they were to ask for, afraid they're more likely to be evicted if they were to ask for the paperwork that's necessary. And basically the paperwork that's necessary is the landlord's utility bill. It's the cost of rent, the cost of utilities for their unit, because once we have that information, the rest of it can be done within the Office of Home Energy Programs. So that's the issue we're trying to fix. Make sure that tenants have access to that information so they can get the money. This is one area that we actually have plenty of money in the system for the Office of Home Energy Programs. There's plenty of money for utility assistance. We just have trouble getting people to have access to the money for utility assistance. So what the bill in front of you, I'll spare the details, is not the right way to do that. However, we've been working with the Office of Home Energy Programs, drafters, advocates, and others, and you should have received an amendment. And basically, it just requires sharing of the utility bill with all renters. And we're working on some details I'll be reaching out to AOBA and others on the timing of when that should happen, once a year or however that's going to work. And so we hope to be able to sort of present the consensus way to solve this shortly to that subcommittee. And I apologize that we didn't get to that consensus just before this hearing, but didn't want to hold things up further. Appreciate the chance to share this challenge with you. I think we're close on the solution, and I'm happy to take questions. Do you want to go next?
Good afternoon once again, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Jose Coronado. I'm a policy analyst with the organization CASA, and I'm here again to lift up and support more important housing legislation. This bill addresses energy, helps us get the funds needed to address energy injustice and energy burden, as well as prevent predatory practices from certain property owners. A lot of our members find themselves in the state's naturally occurring affordable housing stock, which tends to be older buildings, energy inefficient buildings, and these buildings often result in appliances not performing the desired effects, such as AC and heating units doing their job as efficiently as possible, raising up the bills that tenants have to pay. These funds are exactly for that. And it's very difficult when there are landlords that don't participate or want to cooperate with having tenants access these funds for the already energy inefficient unit. So this bill helps us prevent predatory practices like a landlord trying to ask for a fee for the documents that the sponsor described, How can you expect a tenant who is having trouble paying a utility bill to pay an additional fee just for the landlord to maybe send over a PDF of the utility bill or print out these documents? So we see this bill as something that will help in relaxing tenant landlord affairs and also getting funds to people who really need it. With all of that, we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, again, Matt Hill, Public Justice Center. We urge a favorable report as well. I don't have much to add. It's just that we have seen exactly the problem that this bill is seeking to address. Most landlords do cooperate with utility assistance programs and requests for documentation, but some do not. Some just don't answer their emails or a portal request. Some actively refuse to provide the bills or the documentation, maybe because they want to evict the tenant. We have one client actually who's going to testify tomorrow on a different bill, but is kind of in a similar situation in that she is paying these overpriced BGE bills, is not getting the documentation she needs from her landlord. We're going to do what we can for her through the legal system, but she's facing an eviction now because she paid to keep the heat on. And so between those two choices, she's now facing a failure to pay rent action. And so these issues are related. Eviction does lead to homelessness. It leads to all sorts of downstream effects related to education, foster care. And so these issues are incredibly important. And with the sponsor amendments, this is a relatively modest bill. It's going to solve this problem. So we'd ask for a favorable report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the sponsor or her panel? Vice Chair Boyce.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, Delegate Charkoudian, for bringing this bill. It's incredibly important. I know in the city, Baltimore City, we have provisions that allow, for instance, the tenant to be able to speak about the bill so long as the landlord can say, for instance, the person is paying the utility. I do have a question about one, the reference to when the utility bills aren't necessarily broken out per unit, and it's essentially one bill that I guess the landlord may split between properties. How's that managed? One, and then two, the Maryland Realtors amendment about striking the authority for human services to fine for non-compliance.
Yep. Thank you for those questions. So the first issue is OHEP has a formula that they use when there's a master metered building and they get the bill for the whole building. There's a formula for that. And so the issue in that situation is we just need the landlord to provide that information. And that's really where, again, the vast majority of landlords do and a handful don't. And this bill is addressing the ones that don't, or the fear of the renters to ask for it. So OHEP has a way of handling it. I don't know what that formula is, but I know there's a system in place. They just need to see the bill. The second question about the suggested amendments, the direction that I'm taking it, as I said, the new amendments that I have take that into account, but sort of go in a different direction, kind of make it a de facto that all tenants would have access to the information and doesn't have OHEP doing the enforcement because it's just part of what all tenants would have access to. And so there actually end up being no fines associated with it. But it's a standard protection that all tenants get.
Delegate Celebrity.
I heard you say, sir, that the individual, had to pay the heat bill. Is that correct?
Yes, Delegate.
Is she responsible for the heat bill?
Well, she is, and I actually misspoke because in my particular case, that tenant is paying directly to BGE and not to the landlord. And so actually this bill is not going to address her specific situation. I misremembered that. But yes, she is, although irrelevant, but she was renting the entire house. The landlord subdivided the house. And then she ends up paying the energy bill for the entire house instead of just her share. It's these kinds of things that happen all the time in landlord-tenant situations. Well, yes. So the landlord had subdivided the house, and suddenly she was ending up with a bill for the whole house, even though she had just rented out half the house.
Delegate Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for bringing this bill. I like the idea. I just wanted to kind of clarify, like these funds, it's to make sure that the tenant has access to them, correct? Because I guess my concern here would be it kind of creating a perverse incentive for the landlord to continue to be inefficient as far as utilities go and those kinds of things. Like it, I don't know, is there some mechanism to make sure we're not, subsidizing inefficiency as far as the actual housing itself goes?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's there's two ways that the payment can be made. The payment can be made to the landlord, and then it's a credit to the bill. The payment can be made to the tenant if the landlord doesn't want to take it and credit the bill. So those are the two options. This broader issue of connecting energy assistance with energy efficiency programming is one that several of us have been working on for years, and it's really important. And when we see really high energy bills and we're providing assistance, it should be a trigger to also provide support for energy efficiency. I'll say we've made considerable progress in the last few years on that, both for landlords, like people who own multi-unit buildings, as well as for individual renters or homeowners who might just have one building. There's more work to be done, IRA money, and I'm happy to talk offline because it kind of isn't directly related to this bill, but it is something that I've been working on, and we could talk about it in more detail later.
Dr. Holmes, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I apologize. I haven't read the bill.
Good. I mean, that's good because we're not using the bill, we're using the amendment. So,
But this is bringing back questions relevant to what they call RUBS, utility billing systems, when there's one bill throughout the entire. It's bringing back all of these questions again. So is your legislation relevant to the utility bill that is one metered bill that's being distributed to all of the other people, or something different?
yeah. So in order for tenants to be able to access the OHEP program, they need to be able to see the bill, or have the bill provided to OHEP on their behalf. And so that is in the multi-metered building so that OHEP can estimate how much is theirs, right? And then pay that amount that belongs to that tenant who is in a building with 8 other tenants and a master metered building. That's the rub. And without that documentation, it can't get access to the funds. That's the issue. So that's the documentation we're trying to get.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. We do have one more favorable with amendment, which I guess the entire panel is, which is Lisa May from the Maryland Realtors.
Last time, Mr. Chair, I promise. Lisa May with Maryland Realtors. Our written testimony has already been referenced here. We have no objection to the aims of this bill. We do just want to make sure that whatever the final format is conforms to those code sections that we mentioned that already deal in part with sub-metering and providing utility information to tenants. And then also some of our source of income housing protections that prevent discrimination upon receiving government assistance. Really, our main amendment, though, does involve the removal of fines because those are really significant and we believe are unnecessary to ensure compliance from landlords. And with that, we would ask for your favorable vote.
Thank you. I do not. Yep, Vice Chair Boyce.
Thank you so much because I brought it up. And so how is it, or why do you think that the fines are unnecessary? And because you're saying most people do comply, but for those who don't comply, and then those who then cannot get the assistance, that is a big and heavy burden. So what is your assurance that folks would apply?
So some of those code sections do outline penalties as well. So for instance, if you turn down or denied a tenant from being able to use this assistance, that would be a violation of fair housing law in Maryland. The Commission of Civil Rights could instigate enforcement proceedings against an individual who does that. And they have significant, fines and ability to levy penalties already without instituting this second source of fines and penalties.
Okay, I do not see any other questions. So that concludes the hearing on House Bill 139. So we'll bring Delegate Charkoudian back up for our last bill of the afternoon that passed the House last year, HB 216.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, colleagues, Delegate Lori Charkoudian. Here asking for a favorable report on House Bill 216. And the bill passed last year, so in exactly this format, please pass it again. And I'll just quickly say that this has to do with adjusting condo law so that condos are able to install solar panels, EV chargers, clean energy equipment. Last year, we had a concern from the Bankers Association, and we straightened that out, and I don't see him here now, but he's in favor of it this year. And you might recall his favorable amendment testimony last year that was very passionate. But anyways, we resolved those issues that they had, and this is the same bill that passed last year. So basically, it has to do with common ownership communities, the rules that used to be in place that really restricted and at this point have led to condos not being able to put solar on their public common areas. And this adjusts that and fixes that so that they can put it on. Would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon, delegates. My name is Stephen Morrell, CEO of the Montgomery County Green Bank. The Green Bank is a public-private partnership dedicated to accelerating clean energy and climate resilience investments. We catalyze private sector investment through a variety of mechanisms. Over the last 3 years, our projects investments have grown exponentially, and we've been fortunate to work across a variety of sectors. Distributed solar represents almost 70% of that portfolio. It's an important sector for many reasons, including one of the strongest efficacy rates in our portfolio for GHG mitigation per dollar. And two, due to a strong alignment with multifamily properties to maintain affordability. However, we have only ever been able to serve one condo association with power purchase agreement or PPA financing due to these challenges in the condo law. Instead, we have dozens of condo deals that have died in the 11th hour due to trying to comply with the condo law. The condo market in general is traditionally underserved in the solar industry. Project sizes are relatively small, slow to process. Furthermore, volunteer boards juggle competing demands. And so PPAs have a particular appeal to condo boards and nonprofits broadly, given that a developer holds, constructs, and operates the assets. The end user simply purchases the power. The benefits of PPAs are currently overshadowed by a burden of compliance with the condo law originally designed for different types of property alterations. So as the Green Bank, we strongly believe that it is important to align PPA approvals with traditional leasehold association approval procedures. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me, Mr. Chairman and distinguished committee. My name is Jennifer Laszlo Mizrahi, and I serve on the Maryland Commission on Climate Change, and I'm co-founder of our family charitable fund, which supports a lot of nonprofits. We live here in Annapolis, where we've experienced flooding 3 times in the last 6 weeks alone, and I have a daughter with a disability who lives in a condo. I'm here to urge you to vote favorably on SB 206 because climate change is a massive threat, and this bill will help reduce the risk at no cost to taxpayers. It also enables the same people at the most risk from climate change, people with disabilities, to be part of creating a solution. I previously founded and led a Maryland headquartered disability nonprofit, and there are more than 669,000 disabled people living in Maryland, and they are significantly more likely than others to live in multi-family dwellings, including condos. People with disabilities are extreme risk from their underlying health conditions, which can make them more susceptible to death from extreme heat or cold. When the power goes off, people who rely on oxygen can't breathe, and people who use power wheelchairs can't move. When there's flooding, fires, or extreme wind, they often cannot evacuate in time or have no place to go that has appropriate disability accommodations. This bill, which I thank you for, really helps our state achieve our climate goals while enabling people with disabilities to be a part of the solution. Additionally, this bill does not have a cost to taxpayers. Hence, it is win-win-win for our state, our citizens, and our planet alike. I urge you to support it. Thank you.
I'm Joelle Novi from Silver Spring. It was a beautiful day last November when Lorig and former Maryland legislator Jamie Raskin joined us on the roof of Eastern Village Co-Housing in Silver Spring to dedicate our new 96 kilowatt solar project. But celebrating new solar projects on condominium buildings in Maryland shouldn't be such a rare occurrence. And so long as the current language of the Condo Act remains unchanged, the law will continue to kill many promising solar projects on buildings like mine. My own community's solar project nearly came to a screeching halt. It was almost derailed by the current law. Just a few days after our community came to consensus to move forward with the power purchase agreement solar proposal, we were warned that the requirements of the Maryland Condo Act might mean that the Eastern Village Board wouldn't have the authority to sign the agreement themselves. It was so devastating. My heart sank. We are an owner-occupied building. We know all our neighbors. So residential owners being notified about would have been hard but doable. But figuring out who held every mortgage of every unit in the building, figuring out how to notify those mortgage holders in writing, and then securing 2/3 affirmative approval was going to be a grizzly bear. I can see why this requirement keeps killing solar projects in other Maryland condominiums. Eventually, after hours of expensive legal advice, additional discussions, we prevailed. Our board signed a solar power purchase agreement contract, and the panels went live on the summer solstice, June 21st, 2023. But our project was nearly derailed for no good reason. Maryland has ambitious climate goals and a strong commitment to climate action, so all of our elected leaders should be in the business of making clean energy easier, not harder, for all of us in Maryland. Without this bill, which I'm testifying for a second year in a row, promising condo solar projects across the state will continue to be scuttled by requirements of the Condo Act that were never intended to interfere.
I do not see any questions. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, one more. Last and short, I promise. Good evening, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Garrett Fitzgerald, here representing Montgomery County, where I serve as Section Chief for Climate Programs and State Policy. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of HB 216. I think you've heard plenty of good arguments for this bill. I'll just say that we think it appropriately streamlines approval for solar and EV charging, very much the way other utility-related decisions are made quite commonly. We appreciated the committee's support for this bill last year and urge a favorable report again this year. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I do not see Robert Enton, who's your other favorable witness, amazingly. Any questions for the sponsor of the panel? Okay, that concludes the bill hearing on HB 216. Thank you all. Any subcommittee announcements? Chair Holmes?
Housing and real property will meet tomorrow. So pay attention to the emails that have gone out. HRP tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Any others? Okay, that concludes our afternoon. Thank you all. Have a good evening.